When the tour bus crashed, the protagonist thought, just end it all. Give up. Initially, the teenager believed it was the end of his 16 years of life. The accident had the feeling that this road was never ending. The girl who had encouraged the others to share their wishes thought, this is frustrating. Why isn't Luxie talking yet? Meanwhile, no. At that moment, his teacher finally came to his senses. The man was scared and didn't understand where they were. He stood up, put his hand to his head, and said, why am I? Does his head hurt that much? Where did this thick fog come from? The man had more questions than answers and wanted to know where the bus and the driver were. He looked around, hoping that the teenagers would explain something to him. He approached each one in turn, but the boys didn't respond because they didn't understand where they were either. The professor's face grew more and more confused. He hadn't expected such an ending to their school excursion. The teacher's nerves broke, and he shouted, hey, tell me once and for all where we are. One of the teenagers responded, Professor, can you shut up? No one wants to explain anything to you right now. The man actually fell silent, looking even more bewildered. Fan understood the professor's state and observed him in silence. Suddenly, the beautiful Loxie took the hero's hand. The boy looked back and asked her what she wanted. He felt a little uncomfortable talking to his classmate. After his confession on the bus, Beauty blushed and said, I really need to go to the bathroom, but I'm afraid to go alone. Can Xiao come with me? Fan was stunned by her request. His friend didn't know how to respond right away. Meanwhile, Loxie went into the bushes, and Xiao stood next to her. The girl was wearing a long dress, so she had to lift the hem. Her underwear, which had a cute little bear drawn on it, slid down her slender legs to her ankles. Beauty crouched behind the bushes, carefully watching Fan Yang to make sure he didn't spy. Her faithful friend promised to take care of it. The young girl sat down and sadly thought, my image as the pretty girl in class is ruined. Fang and Xiao. He was still talking with his mother, while in the same row, a lone girl wasn't participating in the conversation, appearing withdrawn and confused. The young woman with the microphone, a beautiful girl, then said, also felt uncomfortable being there behind her. At that moment, they heard a loud sound of water, and they both blushed. The young woman mentally begged that her partner would say something to alleviate the situation. He then looked at the boy's hand and asked what he had there. The young man looked at the piece of cloth he was holding and replied, these are the remains of the class representative's clothes. This news left Xiao confused, and she asked, it didn't disappear completely. Fan replied, the class representative's body disappeared, but I still have pieces of his clothes that I accidentally ripped off at the time. There is no scientific explanation for this, the girl asked. Will we have to stay trapped in this fog until we die? The hero replied that the terrible situation could still get worse. Xiao's eyes widened and showed fear. Fan Yang said a single word, food. That was the problem that could hasten their end. Suddenly they heard Luxie's voice. Thank you for accompanying me to the bathroom. It's time to go back. The girl came out of the bushes, looked at her friends, and asked what was wrong with their faces. The hero decided not to scare her, and replied, nothing, let's go. They returned together, companions, who were still sitting near the bench, trapped by the deadly fog. The children wondered when they would be able to return home, but no one had the answer. I don't see anything. Is it really night? Really? I'm hungry. These were the sad conversations between classmates. The teenagers were hunched over with their heads between their knees, desperate. One girl complained loudly to her friend, I'm hungry too. I've already run out of all the food I brought for the excursion. She wanted to know what had happened to the remaining cookies. The young man replied that there was very little left now, He was actually hiding a piece behind his back. The girl complained again about being hungry. Suddenly, she noticed that her companion had turned around and heard the rustling of, this is your only chance to tell the class what's in your heart. Do it now, or you'll regret it later. After those words, Luxie's expression shifted from confusion to determination. A rapper. She asked him what he was doing, and the boy lied. Nothing. She lunged at him, trying to snatch the cookies. Hunger clouded the poor girl's mind, and she lost control. The young man pushed her and stood up, saying, it's my food. The girl screamed, you pushed me for a piece of cookie? How could you? Aren't you supposed to like me? Meanwhile, the chubby boy looked around, thinking, there's nothing but fog in this ghost town. Why the hell is all of this happening to me? Suddenly, he had a terrible revelation. We could all die here. The boy reached aside a hand into his pocket and took out the food he still had left. He wasn't going to share it with anyone, and began to eat it quickly. Then, he received a strong kick in the back. The student was pushed by the teacher, who wore a furious expression. The young man lost his balance and fell to the ground, with cookies and candies scattering from his pockets. The teacher silently picked up a chocolate bar from the floor. The chubby boy looked around with a scared face, but still insisted that the food was his. It seems that not everyone could withstand the test of hunger. Even the only adult among the teenagers couldn't resist, punching him in the face while yelling, "Now this is all mine." The teacher called the children brats and appeared to have gone completely insane. He screamed incessantly, demanding that the teenagers hand over all of the food. From that moment onward, the entire class had to obey without question. The man continued, shouting, demanding that all the food be brought to him as quickly as possible. One of the boys voiced what everyone was thinking. "I think our teacher has lost his mind." The teacher called, "Adolescents, demons, and parasites." LXI leaned on Xiao, admitting that she was scared. Pain didn't respond to the madman's cries for food. The teacher shouted again, "If you're so slow, this fat man." She stood up and walked towards Fan. He was still talking on the phone, but the young woman softly called his name. The boy finally heard her and looked at Luxie with a question in his eyes. "Will be the first to fall." Fang thought the man was completely out of control. His mind was racing. In this crazed crowd, the one with power rules. It was then that the teacher went from words to actions, kicking a defenseless girl who flew through the air before crashing to the ground. The blow to her stomach was so powerful that blood gushed from her mouth. The madman shouted, "Who else dares to joke with me? Don't think you can hide anything from me. Hand everything over." The man eagerly awaited the next student who dared to approach him with food. Now it was one mind's turn to confront the tyrant. This boy was outraged by the teacher's behavior and clenched his teeth in rage. He jumped up and shouted, "Why the hell should I give you anything at all?" And then, turning to his classmates, he added, "He's just an old professor. He's only pretending to be strong. We shouldn't be afraid of him. If we give him all our food, we'll starve. So don't even think about it." Wang shouted, "Give us back our food, or my parents will take care of you." The man outlined a sinister smile and replied, "You want your food? Come and get it." Some frightened classmates tried to stop him, but Wang Land exclaimed, "I'm not afraid of him. I'm going to get our food back." Food. The boy took a decisive step towards his crazed teacher. Meanwhile, the teacher had no intention of returning the stolen provisions. A pen suddenly flew out from his sleeve. A terrible smile reappeared on his face. He still radiated danger. Fang realized that Wang Land wouldn't be able to defeat the master. The young man warned his friend, exclaiming, "Get away from him as fast as you can." Hearing these words, the boy looked away from the provisions, but it was already too late. A pen with a sharp tip pierced Wang Land's temple. The girl closed her eyes, put her hands together, and exclaimed, "I like you." She said it so loudly that the entire class heard her confession. For a moment, the bus fell silent. The boys were Wang Land. The teacher's face was terrifying, as if he was enjoying what he had just done. The children began to crawl away, completely terrified. The man smiled, in a creepy, and asked, "Now do you understand who the real leader is here?" Wang Min clutched his hand to his wound. The teacher questioned if he hadn't been too trusting. "Only, you rely on your rich parents. They yell at me every day and treat me like an idiot. I've already lived half my life. You brats have no right to look down on me like that." He approached the fat boy and grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. "Do you expect to go back to the normal world and accuse me? Do you want your rich parents to punish me?" he asked furiously. The cowardly boy began to beg for help. Tears and snot streamed down his face simultaneously. The man pushed him to the ground and promised that they would never get out of there. The boys didn't want to believe the teacher's words, but at that moment, everyone was terrified. What if it's true? They wondered. Look around you. Do you think this is just fog? I have lived many years, and I have never seen anything like it, the madman shouted. Fog for everywhere. Fog, fog, and nothing but fog. The teacher seemed to relish it. There was no longer a stupid headmaster, no repulsive school, no ugly and arrogant women. He inhaled deeply through his nose and said, "My God, what pure air. I love this damned place." But in the next instant, with a suddenly changed tone, the teacher vowed that no one would leave there alive. His words sounded like a curse, and hunger took hold of everyone. Every hour, every moment, someone fell unconscious. Fang still resisted, hoping to find a way out of that dreadful situation. Frightening. At that time, the boys were unaware of the horrors that awaited them. Loxie could barely stand, trying to suppress her hunger. While the children suffered, the teacher calmly ate, stunned to see that the prettiest girl in the class was confessing her feelings for Fan Yang. The protagonist, meanwhile, couldn't find the words to respond. All the boys were in love with the food he had taken from them. His eyes glowed with a red fire. He seemed possessed. Good afternoon, dear friends. We continue our live broadcast from the scene of The Facts. This is the location where a very unusual car accident took place. Since the accident occurred, the police have not released any statements, and as of now, there are no new updates. You can see that crowds of furious parents have already gathered in front of the police station, demanding answers. Let's listen to what they have to say. Several days have passed, and none of the students have been found yet. Don't the police know anything at all? A man questioned. Another added, they have time to ask us strange questions, but they've only sent a handful of people to search for the boys. A woman was crying, worried about her daughter. Wang Lian silently observed the frightened parents. Her partner said, we've been watching for several days, and no one has noticed anything out of the ordinary. He asked his partner, if we don't find the portal, what are we going to do? The man didn't respond immediately, continuing to chew his fruit in silence. Then, he looked up at the girl and said, keep going. I'm searching, and I have a lot of patience. The young woman wanted to know how much longer the children could hold out. The man touched Mitado's chest, and she reacted immediately, slapping him right then and there. The police officer was about to return to the station when a woman called out to him, begging him, her husband, to save their son. She was convinced that he wasn't dead, saying that she had seen him. The man tried to calm her down, claiming that she was hallucinating and that there was no one there. Wang Liang commented to his friend, there are always mothers who hallucinate when they are grieving. It's a shame. Suddenly, the woman shouted, I'm not crazy. I really saw my son. The representative from the Special Investigations Department overheard the distraught woman adding, I saw him in XY and were unhappy that they hadn't been chosen. A young man with glasses thought, it seems that even Fan isn't immune to human feelings. Wait, when did the fog outside become so thick? A cloud of fog. Hang didn't even get the chance to put the cherry in his mouth. The young man asked Mu who that woman's son was. The assistant handed him a tablet, pointed to the boy, and added, who was a 9th grade student in Class 1. The man reviewed the boy's profile. Fan, 16 years old, height 178 centimeters, weight 63 kilograms, date of birth the 10th of May 2002. Fan's mother couldn't calm down and kept begging the officer to save her son. Suddenly, a plate of fruits and berries was placed directly in front of his nose. Hang became interested in the story of the unfortunate woman and decided to speak with her. He asked her to stay and smiled kindly. Apparently, he and his assistant invited Fan's mother to his office. After she received a cup of aromatic tea, the woman began her story. The night my son disappeared, I had a dream, the mother said. Wang Liang wanted to hear the details. It was as if Fan was trapped in a cloud of fog, unable to find his way out. I reached my hand out to him, but he ran in the opposite direction. I tried with all my might to reach him, but I couldn't. And then, suddenly, he reappeared. Right in front of me, the woman continued. Her son called out to her. She was overjoyed and ran towards him. But as she reached out to touch him, the boy began to disintegrate. And then, suddenly, as if, like a flower, right before my eyes, my son's face turned into withered petals. The woman was paralyzed, unable to believe that she had lost her son again. At that moment, she woke up abruptly in bed, knocking a cup of water off the nightstand. The water spilled onto the floor, and as she looked at the puddle, the woman caught a glimpse of her son pulling on a rope. I really saw him. It wasn't a hallucination. I couldn't have mistaken my son for anyone else, the heartbroken woman added. A representative from the department of the driver rubbed his eyes, unable to understand why it was so difficult to see the road. An instant later, his eyes widened as he finally saw what was being revealed. Special Investigations asked his assistant if he had heard everything. Hang Liang had only one idea in mind. Perhaps this woman is the portal itself. She wiped away her tears. The memories. His son's situation only made him suffer even more. Suddenly, he looked into the cup and saw Fang's reflection on the surface of the tea again. He couldn't believe what he was seeing in his eyes, and shouted his son's name with force. It was at that moment, in another reality, that Fan Yang abruptly turned around, hearing his mother's voice. Xiao noticed a change in his friend's face and asked him what was happening. He responded that he thought he had heard a familiar voice, but dismissed it as a hallucination brought on by hunger. Luxi no longer had the strength to resist. Her eyes closed, she lost her balance, and she fell against her friend's shoulder. Xiao said, "This is bad. Luxi is completely weak. She's too hungry and doesn't have any strength left to hold on." Fang glared angrily at the teacher, who continued eating without paying attention to the exhausted children. A drop of sweat trickled down his face as he tried to decide what to do. Next up, how to save their companions. All the children's thoughts revolved around a single thing: food. It was unbearable to watch the teacher eating alone. In Luxi's mind, there was only one thought: to eat. Fang thought that they had already lost this battle for food. It was impossible to win. Suddenly, the man raised a bag of chips above his head and asked, "Who wants some?" "This bag of flavored chips is right here in my hand," the teacher said with a malicious smile. That offer made the children who hadn't yet fainted feel eager to get their hands on those chips. The only thing stopping them was the pen in the teacher's hand, the same one that had already injured Wang Lang. One young man told another that he was in front of him. Meanwhile, the scene between Loxi and Fan Yang became uncomfortable, with the hero not saying a word to the girl. Tears welled up in the young woman's eyes as she said that she understood everything. Incredibly hungry, his friend warned him, "Have you already forgotten what happened to Wang? Don't go near him." The man continued to taunt the children. "What's wrong? Aren't you hungry?" "I'm not. It's annoying." The teacher opened a bag of chips and began eating them loudly, doing it on purpose, chewing obnoxiously to drive the hungry students crazy. It was true torture for hungry teenagers. The jerk took another chip from the bag and asked with a smile, "Really? No one wants any?" No matter how hungry they were, no one dared approach the teacher. He brought the chips to his mouth, about to take a bite, when suddenly someone shouted, "I want one." It was a young man with blue hair, who couldn't resist the temptation. "Oh, you're hungry?" he said. The teacher with mockery in his voice. It was clearly a trap, but the boy, faint with hunger, didn't perceive the danger signs. Then, the teacher put the chip back in the bag, said he remembered, "You used to despise me, and your father, the director, came to see me last time and called me a pig for getting in his way." Obviously, the teacher was looking for revenge, for his old wounds. He wanted to know if the boy remembered that moment. The young man's face filled with fear, and he didn't know what to say. "Of course, there's nothing wrong with wanting to eat," the teacher continued, enjoying having power over them. He gave him a condition. He had to run around him twice like a pig and bark like a dog. "You can't force me to," the boy said. "What part?" "Don't you understand?" the teacher replied. The boy turned around and said he wasn't hungry and wouldn't humiliate himself like that. Since he was the principal's son, the teacher laughed. "You have character, but look at you. Here, you can last a day or two, but then the third day will come." All the boys understood what the man was referring to. Fang continued to watch the spectacle in silence, but at that moment, the driver slammed on the brakes, and everyone on the bus felt that something was wrong with the road. Fang leaned forward, barely managing to hold onto the mark. The cunning Pei was known not to hold out for long. The teacher asked the principal's son if he thought he could survive 5 or 10 days without food. Without saying anything further, the boy fell. Knees, surprising the few companions who were still conscious. Then, he raised his head and barked like a dog. The master had managed to break his pride, and the young man continued, behaving like a puppy, trying desperately to get food. The spectacle made the madman laugh, as he was delighted with his own invention. He laughed out loud at the sight of the director's son, being humiliated. "What a pity your dad can't see this. You're such an obedient little dog, and all for a measly piece of food." The young man stretched out his hand, hoping to finally satisfy his hunger, but the teacher wasn't finished with his humiliation. He intentionally dropped the potato on the ground and, before the boy could pick it up, he crushed it with his foot. He reveled in his joke. "Oops, it fell. What a pity," he said to himself. "That's all I can offer you now," he added, pointing at the crumbs with his foot. The bastard saw the young man hesitate and asked, "Well, are you hungry?" The boy's hands trembled as he gathered the crumbs. He brought a piece directly from the floor to his mouth. Then he lowered his hand again, eagerly picking up the remaining scraps. He quickly stuffed those meager leftovers into his mouth and declared that they were delicious. The director's son ate with gusto, convinced it was the most delicious food he had ever tasted. "The teacher," he shouted, "the one who obeys will eat." The teenagers began hitting each other, competing for even a single bite. One of the girls had a face full of bruises, one eye wouldn't even open. Hunger and desperation had transformed them into true predators. The mad teacher reveled in the spectacle. He kept repeating, "I only want you to obey." The young man to start thinking differently, and that event changed his life forever. The boy then heard his mother scream, "Are you lying? My son couldn't have died." Her eyes were set. Luxie started to fall, but the young man managed to grab her hand. He had sensed the danger before the others and wanted to save her. The girl looked at him in surprise and asked him what he was doing. The fat boy was watching the director's son. He could barely stop himself from attacking him to steal his food. As he watched him eat, saliva pooled in his mouth, which he swallowed with difficulty. Speed. The young man stood up, determined to become obedient, even if it only meant gaining one friend. Suddenly, someone grabbed his arm to stop him from humiliating himself. It was Fang, who, he asked him not to do it. The fat boy replied, "Fang, I'm incredibly hungry. That guy is crazy. I'll cheer him up a little and get some food. It's no big deal. The hero looked down and he responded that it wouldn't be that simple. He explained that the master was demonstrating his power over them in that way. If no one had food, they would go crazy with hunger, and then he would not. Could control this crazed crowd, said Fang. When everyone got used to begging and constantly accepting that situation, the hero fell silent. Who wouldn't want to know? What would happen then? The students will obey the teacher and do everything he wants, Fang explained. Then they will become true slaves in this fog. The fat man believed, companion, and stood next to him. Suddenly, the young man noticed the teacher had shifted his attention to Xiao. If you want to eat, the wretched man said to the girl, then take off your clothes. Behind the young woman, Luxi lay unconscious. The man tossed her a bun and said, come on, take off your shirt. The girl was paralyzed with fear. Her eyes looked like they were popping out of her head, and he remained silent. What's wrong? The madman asked. Don't you want to eat? Things could get worse for your friend. Luxi, still unconscious, whispered, barely audible, I'm hungry. Xiao couldn't bear to see how her companion was losing her last bit of strength. The mad teacher's hand reached toward the student's chest. At the last moment, the young woman recoiled, unable to overcome her revulsion. Without responding, the hero shielded her with his body and threw them both to the floor. A confused Luxi asked, what are you doing? Our companions are right here, Fan shouted loudly. This defiant behavior irritated the unfortunate man. He approached the student again and ordered her in a threatening tone. Be obedient and undress. If you don't follow my order, you'll see what happens to them. Pass it on to the others, the madman threatened. The young woman's eyes rolled back in fear. The threat genuinely terrified her. Xiao imagined her companions killing each other right before her eyes. Fang noticed that the girl was hesitant and called out to her. He wanted to run towards them, but the fat man stopped him. Don't go, he really might kill someone, but the hero didn't stop. You're a damned bastard, he shouted at the teacher. Xiao was very scared, trembling and begging for help, but the teacher did not respond to her pleas. He demanded that she undress immediately. The man was getting closer and closer to the defenseless young woman. The unfortunate man smiled wickedly and said, I wonder, what will this girl taste like? Fang still hadn't arrived to rescue his friend. Suddenly, something happened that could change the whole situation. Finally, another teacher appeared, Professor Sang, who was returning from a field trip with her class. The fat man was surprised to see that she had also fallen into this situation with them. The accident occurred, and everyone was confused. When the boy woke up, he saw his teacher, who was seriously injured and hadn't been able to approach them for a long time. At that time, several girls took turns taking care of her. The fat man thought that everything would be all right now, that the teacher was conscious and could protect them. But P smiled and thought, things aren't that simple in the adult world. Fang also believed that things wouldn't improve and didn't share his classmates' optimism. The teacher approached her crazy colleague, and a silence fell between them. The man seemed confused. The teacher's appearance ruined all of his plans. The woman stood in front of Xiao and said, he's very young. If the police find us, it will be difficult for you to explain all this. Get down! A second later, all the windows shattered, and shards of glass rained down on the students. The storm was so powerful that it could lift a car. At first, the man seemed surprised. Confusion was written on his face, but in the next instant, he laughed and said, explain? Professor Sang, I see you still don't understand what's going on. We are all going to die. Don't you understand? No one is coming to help us, he exclaimed with a deranged look. This ghostly fog is killing people and turning them into mummies, he said, gesturing to the side. There haven't been any search and rescue operations for days, and no one has cell service. And the worst part is that the mummified bodies are disappearing. The woman asked where they were going, and who could help them, and why the police hadn't found them yet. Even if someone is looking for us, how long will it take for them to find us? The madman asked his colleague. Then he answered himself, in 2 more days, half of these people will starve to death. We're dead. Professor Sang glared at her colleague with disgust. If you want to help this girl, do it yourself. We can. Have some fun before we die. I promise I won't disappoint, the man said. The woman was shocked by his proposition. That repulsive man wanted Professor Sang to strip in front of him. She was so perplexed that she didn't know what to say to that bastard. The madman didn't want to wait any longer. Well, are we just going to keep standing here? One of you has to take off your clothes today. Decide who it will be. The teacher stood between him and the crazy man and told the girl not to worry. Beads of sweat ran down the woman's face. I'll do whatever you want, she said. Tears welled up in the student's eyes. She didn't want Professor Sang to suffer because of her. The woman asked the boys to turn around. She was truly willing to sacrifice herself for her student. But that humiliation wasn't enough for the wretched man. He ordered that no one turn around. Licking his lips, he said, "Come on, Professor Sang. I'm waiting." The woman began to. Several tons. The wind tore trees from their roots, and everything spun in a deadly dance. Meanwhile, every television channel in the country interrupted its regular programming with, "Slowly unbutton the buttons of her white blouse." She reached the button that concealed her bra and cleavage. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Stop!" and covered the woman's chest with their hand. Fang didn't. I couldn't stand that madness any longer. He stood up to defend his teacher. The madman shouted furiously, "Damn brat, now it's your turn to die." With the pen in his hand, already stained with blood, he took a docker. He walked towards the boy, but the boy said something that stopped him. "I know where we are." Then he added something else that made everyone present listen intently. "I know how we can survive here." The teacher didn't know what to say, but the students began to murmur, "Can we really get out of here?" There was a long pause, and finally the madman asked the boy who had spoken. Fan repeated, "I said I know where we are, and I know how to survive." Professor San was worried about the boy and asked him not to provoke the madman, but the young man reassured her, saying that he had a plan. The hero added, "We must not give in to this, much less to a wretch like him." The madman, furious, shouted, "If you keep talking nonsense, I'm going to beat you to a pulp." A hand holding a pen stained with blood on the feathers was closing in on Fang. That makeshift weapon appeared before the brave young man's eyes in an instant. Xiao screamed, fearing that his friend would suffer at the hands of that madman. Just one more second, and the sharp pen could end up piercing the hero's head. Suddenly, the unfortunate man felt the atmosphere grow considerably colder. He looked into Fang's eyes and realized that this was not the look of a simple high school student. Suddenly, Pease intervened and suggested they listen to his partner's plan. The professor objected. "Why should we listen to such nonsense?" The clever young man asked the madman, "Don't you want to get out of here?" The man looked at the other students and began to feel afraid. It seemed they were no longer afraid of him, and there were so many of them. It was clear. Breaking news alerts. Today, at 3:22 p.m., a serious accident occurred at the Daxing exit of the Suan-Chenghuan Expressway. A bus full of students crashed into an. Which side held the advantage? The bespectacled man asked Fang to share his plan. The hero looked at everyone present and took a moment to gather his thoughts. That silence irritated the crazed teacher. "Speak quickly," he yelled, "but you better not say anything stupid, especially not about me. Your teammates might tear you apart for that." Fang didn't let it intimidate him. He smiled and closed his eyes. "Everyone, calm down. I'm sure no one has ever been in a situation quite like this. We're trapped. There's no communication, and there are no other people besides us. It's like we're on a deserted island, with no one looking for us. That also means we're very far from being rescued," the hero said. "Don't say nonsense," the professor responded angrily. "Who knows what happened? This guy just wants to deceive us," the young man explained. "The only thing I want to say is that right now we are in the city," H continued, saying that they were right in the middle of the third ring road in the city center. The boy's classmates were stunned by the news and began to deny it. "There's no way he can. Seriously? Are you kidding me? If we were in City H, the police would have found us already. They'd be all over this," they were saying. Pleased by the others' doubts, the professor commented, "I see that. You're trying to make a cheap impression on everyone." But suddenly, a man with glasses interrupted the conversation. "Quiet, everyone. I actually believe what Fang is saying. Let's hear what he has to say before criticizing him." "Happy to be heard," he asked Fang to continue. The hero pointed to the pavement near the bench and the grass. "The grass is planted with violets mixed along the edges with red plums and osmanthus bushes. The pavement leads to a park path and a staircase winding through the trees." The students began to observe their fighted overpass. "The number of injured and dead has yet to be confirmed," the correspondent reported live from the scene. "What's most unusual is that the police have sealed off the area and do not surroundings." "It's true, and I didn't even notice," said one girl. "There is something similar, yes, but there are many places like this in the world. We can't rule out that there are other identical locations," said a young man. Fang explained his reasoning, which included the magnolia flower-shaped lampposts. "These are common along the third ring road of City H, but that's not the main point." The hero presented a piece of paper, stating, "I found this advertisement with a contact number, and it definitely uses City H's area code. It's not just a coincidence. I'm sure we're in the eastern section of the third ring road." The young man concluded that this was precisely where the bus accident had occurred, and the others sighed in relief, naively believing that knowing their location meant they could easily return home. Suddenly, someone voiced the question everyone dreaded. If we're really in City H, then why haven't we been found yet? Why isn't anyone walking around? The whole area is enveloped in this poisonous fog. And why aren't the phones working? Fan responded. That's right. Still, there are too many mysteries. But we've already identified our location, and there are probably convenience stores within a few hundred meters. If we can find them, we'll have a chance to survive and wait for rescue. Someone shouted from the crowd. But this fog has already killed several people. How are we supposed to get out of here? Fang didn't have time to respond because a sound suddenly caught his attention. The teacher approached the hero, noting that everyone was being mummified by the fog. He stepped closer and asked the teenager, "Are you going to save us all, or are you going to kill us?" The entire ninth grade class fell silent, tensely awaiting the hero's response. The man with glasses noticed the expressions on the others' faces and scratched his nose nervously. Allows doctors to enter. Journalists have not witnessed any injured individuals being evacuated from the location. The presenter added, "To uncover the truth, our team discovered a hidden path." The young man stood up. He thought Fang's idea was quite clear and easy to execute, but he needed everyone to be in agreement. Pays wondered what his classmates would choose. The hero. He rolled his eyes, awaiting the others' decision. Pleased by the overall silence, the teacher commented, "You've already spouted enough nonsense. Do you still believe you won't die here? Then tell me, how we'll get out of here? Oh, great detective." Fang looked at everyone, gathering his courage, and finally responded firmly, "I'll go alone to find the nearest supermarket." That sacrifice made the teacher change his attitude. The food he had taken from the boys fell to the ground at his feet. "Fan Yangan, in that case, I'll give you everything you need," the man said. The boys eagerly pounced on the recovered food, but immediately the teacher added, "You can boast that you'll find a way out, but if you fail..." The madman promised that in that case, the young man would die first. Leanda, who was sitting next to Fang, became very nervous. The hero replied to the teacher, "Don't worry, if I don't succeed, I'll die in the fog without your help." Help. But the man wasn't calming down. With a strange smile, he asked, "Do you really think your death will solve everything?" He approached Luxie and took her hand. Exhausted, Chow screamed, trying to protect her friend, but the unfortunate man grabbed her by the neck and said, "I see you have a good relationship with this girl. She can stay with me for a while." The scoundrel. He brought his ugly face closer to the terrified Luxie's head. "If you deceive me, you know what will happen," the madman threatened, as he ran his tongue across the terrified girl's cheek. The girl could only instanter say the name of her hero, her dream, that he would come to save her. Finito said, "Let her go. You must come with me and Lian T." After calming his emotions, the young man added that, 3. Hidden. I invite you to uncover it with us, as we are broadcasting live. Suddenly, she shouted, "Wait, what are they doing?" At that moment, a hand covered the camera lens. In the next moment, people were needed to set their plan in motion. The man replied that it would be difficult to do so, since he had to take care of everyone present, so he couldn't leave. He wasn't willing to put himself in more danger. The professor turned to the students and said, "Come on, who wants to go with these heroes? If you do, I'll give you even more food." The young people remained silent, as none of them considered themselves brave enough to do something like that. Then, suddenly, someone decided to take a decisive step forward. It was the boy with glasses himself, and his determination surprised his classmates. Fanny remained perplexed, as apparently he did not expect to have that particular companion. Now the 3 boys were standing in front of a wall of dense fog. The hero asked the boy with glasses if he was sure he wanted to do that. "It will be difficult, no doubt," P. responded. "But I also want to do something for everyone." Lian Ta, trembling with fear, asked, "Could the same thing happen to us as happened to the group leader?" Fang remained silent, staring intently at the wall of fog. He finally replied, "If my assumptions are correct, then we have a chance." After those words, the young man ordered his comrades, "Move forward." The other students watched them with fearful gazes. The beautiful Loxie's eyes filled with tears. She was deeply worried about whether Fan would return alive. She couldn't contain her emotions, and tears streamed down her cheeks. At that moment, the heroes were already inside the fog. Suddenly, Fang ordered them to halt. Lianga couldn't control the shivers running down her spine and asked what was happening. Gritting his teeth, the hero explained, "Last time, the representative arrived at this exact spot. We must check if anything has changed." P. nodded. Yes, he seemed to be fine at that time. Fang extended his hand forward, attempting to test his theory. He immediately noticed that his 5 fingers began to darken. The equipment was ripped from the operator's hands and thrown to the ground. A high boot stomped on the journalist's camera. Those nearby saw a strange couple, a young blonde man and a lean, frightened, asked his friend what he was going to do. P remained silent. Only the sweat running down his cheek betrayed his tension. The hero kept his hand in the same position. It was an experiment on which lives depended, so he had to finish it. Gritting his teeth, Fang plunged his hand further into the fog. Liang covered his eyes with his hands and screamed, "Fang, he's about to become a mummy." The more composed P ordered his companion to be quiet and watch. The hero closed his eyes so he wouldn't see his hand mummifying, but in the next instant, he overcame his fear and forced himself to look forward. His arm was fine, his theory was confirmed. The young man took a deep breath and thought, "Just as I expected." Finally, he said to his friends, "It seems to be safe, at least right ahead." The fat boy couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What does that mean? That we're not going to turn into mummies?" A wise man responded. He once said, "For, however strange things may be, everything has a rule," P added. "Even though I don't know what kind of fog this is, we've all been safe these past few days. That means it doesn't cause harm in a certain area." Specific. "Fang, do you want to find an area free of the fog?" he asked with a smile. The hero didn't respond, only saying, "You don't need to follow me. I'll go alone." Leanda, still scared, stammered, "Double. Where are you going?" The young man replied simply, "Perhaps to a place that isn't the safest." Leanta tried to stop him, but P just watched in silence, unwilling to risk it. The brave fan took a step forward, about to discover what awaited him. He reached out again, approaching the unknown. Sweat covered his face and neck as the young man's hand slowly but steadily approached the deadly fog. Leanda, scared, wanted to ask the captain of their small group what he should do. He suddenly saw Fan Yang disappear into the mist, and, "Beautiful woman with pink hair, remaining in a city where you shouldn't be will lead to your death," the stranger said in a threatening tone. The journalist shouted that this violated the shout. He was hoping to hear that the other was okay. Meanwhile, the teachers, now without Fan Yang, decided to resolve the situation. The man shouted, "That boy spoke with such confidence. He ate my food, but in the end it died in the fog, and you still dare to mention it in front of me?" He lashed out at the frightened teacher, but the woman responded, "What if those brave boys haven't died?" The madman smiled and asked, "Aren't they dead?" But the next moment he shouted, "Those 3 idiots disappeared into the fog 2 days ago. If there was food around the corner, like that fool said, why haven't they come back?" The teacher didn't know how to respond. Suddenly, both adults noticed that she was whispering, "God, protect Fan. Don't let anything happen to him." The unfortunate girl's prayer made the evil man even angrier. He didn't know love, so he couldn't understand what that beautiful young woman felt. The unfortunate man raised his hand so that the girl would shut up. A red mark appeared on the fragile young woman's face. Luxie lost her balance and fell to the ground. The scoundrel roughly grabbed the girl's elbow, and, bringing his face close to hers, he exclaimed, "That brat is already dead. Haven't you heard? Your Fan cheated me out of food. He deserves to become a mummy." The infamous man mocked the young woman, but, suddenly, she found the strength to answer him. "Fan Yang couldn't have died. I believe in him," Luxie said, looking directly into the madman's eyes. The villain did not expect such defiance from a beauty so fragile and powerless. The man hit her again, and she fell to the ground. She was in pain, but she gritted her teeth to keep from crying. The mad teacher asked his students, "Do you know why? I haven't touched them until now, because I had hoped that those 3 would manage to return, but now it's clear that they won't be coming back." The infamous one looked at the unfortunate LXE and added, "There's no longer any." Closed, but the voice of the person closest to him, calling him by name, was able to break through the barrier between life and death. The mother managed to awaken her son and bring him back. Freedom of the press. She promised to expose the secrets of that strange couple operating under the black umbrella, but they paid her no attention and walked away from the fenced-off area where the incident occurred. Meaning, in letting them live. These words from the cursed man terrified the young woman. The girl's big eyes reflected the figure of the madman approaching her with his hands extended, but the teacher was relentless and tore the poor girl's dress. She pleaded for help, but no one was quick to intervene, and her classmates remained seated, looking pinned to the ground, ignoring her cries for help. From the entire class, only Xiao rushed to defend his friend. The men whispered menacingly, "That's it, you're finished." The next moment, he punched the young girl in the stomach with all his strength. The girl coughed up blood and fell to the ground, unable to stand. Li shouted her friend's name. She felt deeply sorry for the suffering she had caused, but at that moment, the scoundrel turned to her, saying, "Before, I could only watch you arrive and leave in your luxury cars to a good school. All I could do was mop floors, carry things, and clean bathrooms. It's a truly terrible feeling. But now, the scoundrel felt like, God believing he wouldn't be punished, grinned with his crazy smile. I can do whatever I want here, the bastard exclaimed. Xiao feared for her friend, but there was nothing more she could do. The girl, she thought, everyone is so helpless from hunger that they can no longer resist. The beautiful girl screamed, begging the teacher to stop, and suddenly, he did. Suddenly, the girl realized what had happened. Behind the scoundrel was Teacher Sang, with a stone in her hand. The woman explained, frightened, I saw a piece of brick on the other side. Luxie then got up and threw herself into the teacher's arms. The scoundrel lay motionless on the ground. Sang stroked the girl's head, trying to calm her down. Don't cry, little one, it's okay. Suddenly, the tragedy. Suddenly, something beneath his feet caught the blonde's attention. He and his companion stopped in front of the destroyed pavement. The young man asked the girl, do you smell that? It's a... The beauty's expression changed again, and her eyes moved to her forehead. The teacher noticed the change, but did not sense the danger looming behind her back. The scoundrel regained consciousness, grabbed the woman by the hair, and held a pen to her face. I see you're really eager to die. In the next instant, a sharp pen was plunged into the woman's skin near her eye. The teacher screamed loudly, suffering immensely. Luxie retreated with tears streaming down her face, but it turned out she was right. Fan and the other two who were with him returned safely with bags of food. The students couldn't believe they had been saved from starvation. P picked up a bag of food and said, Friends, we found some food, so we can hold out a little longer. The children couldn't tear their eyes away from the food package, completely mesmerized. But in the next moment, they all rushed towards the boy, thinking he was so cool. Liana angrily told Fang, he took all the glory, but it was actually your plan. The hero responded with a smile. It's okay, the most important thing is that everyone now has meal. Suddenly, the young man spotted Master Sangi Loxi and rushed towards them. The beautiful woman, with tears welling up in her eyes, said, Fan, you have no idea what happened here after you left. The hero. He understood everything without a word when he saw the condition of the girl's dress. He then turned his gaze to Master Sang. She had a fever, and drops of blood were falling from the fingers she held to her face. Looking around, the hero scanned the area, trying to find his friend Xiao. He finally spotted the girl lying on the ground, clutching her stomach. Everything he saw left the teenager stunned, and anger took over his soul. The hero wasn't going to endure it any longer. He noticed a baseball bat on the ground and picked it up. The young man swung it, ready to bring it down on the master's head. A very familiar aroma. At that moment, someone shouted, Who let strangers in here? Who are you? And what are you doing in this place? A police officer approached them. Don't you know you can't just come in and... Suddenly, someone placed a hand on his shoulder. It was P, and for some reason, he decided to intervene. Enraged, Fan asked his companion, Do you want to save him? The young man replied, Of course not, but these kinds of things must be resolved collectively. The clever boy adjusted his glasses with a smile and proposed judging the scoundrel, but Fang still hadn't managed to control his anger. Judge? P explained his reasoning, stating that if they wanted to get out of here, it's important to think beyond logic. The young man believed that their state of health should also be seriously considered. Meanwhile, somewhere in the headquarters of the Special Investigation Department, Wang Liang was looking at a photograph of Fang's mother, completely absorbed. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice when Mo entered his office with a plate of fresh fruits. The girl asked her boss, Can this woman really be a portal? Lian replied, I don't know. There's never any logic to finding its location, and there are no people who know where it is. He didn't take his eyes off the photo on the tablet as Mitao said, So much has happened. Time has passed, and we haven't been able to locate these students. He didn't expect his question to make his boss laugh. When he calmed down, he looked at the beauty and said, Your naivety is incompatible with your appearance. The girl became angry at her classmate's words. Wang added that it didn't matter where they were. At that moment, he was pointing out different locations on the map of the city. They could even be in this room, in a park, a store, or a cinema. We can neither see them nor touch them, the man added. The only thing we need to figure out as soon as possible is where the portal is located. He was confident that everything would be easily resolved. Then, the hero's mother was left in his laboratory. By attaching several sensors to the woman, they tried to leave as you please, he asked, annoyed. The officer tried to chase the strangers away, but they didn't flinch. A white-gloved hand touched the blonde young man's jacket. It was. Understand if she truly was a portal to another dimension, Mit Tao said sadly. It's been 2 weeks since the accident. His boss responded, Yes, someone really needs to find something. Soon. The man believed that time was the real key to any solution, and it was time for him to return to the parallel world. The scoundrel started to regain consciousness, and the next moment he shouted, "Don't make any noise, shut up now." Lienta was the first to notice that the master had woken up, and she called Fan and everyone else over. The man was sitting, bound, hand and foot. Realizing his situation, the scoundrel yelled, "You damned bastards, how dare you tie me up? Untie me right now." The man with glasses smiled and said, "There's no hurry, this is only the beginning," the hero said. "We don't want to do anything bad, but you must promise that you won't harm anyone else because of your selfishness and self-righteousness at the expense of the weak." The scoundrel retorted, "Are you pretending to be a good person? You were gone for 2 whole days, eating, getting drunk, and only then did you decide to come back, and you dare lecture me about selfishness?" Lienta couldn't help but scream, "You're trying to throw us off, you mud-slinging jerk. We're going up way too fast." Suddenly, the boys heard one of their classmates say, "They were really gone for 2 full days. We almost starved to death." Other children began to support the boy, saying that the boys had been gone for far too long. Fong was stunned by this news. The young man thought, confused. "What an unexpected twist," he said to the others. "There's no way we walked that long. They must be mistaken." His companions responded, "We've been waiting for you, for a very long time. There's no way we could all be wrong. What exactly happened to them?" Lienta decided to tell them what occurred. When Fang disappeared into the fog, the young man also dared to reach his hand. Then that the pink-haired beauty intervened, grabbing the policeman's arm. She must have had martial arts skills, because she severely injured him with a single move. Into it. Overcoming his own fear and gritting his teeth, he finally decided to go through. The young man followed his friend, but he was too afraid to open his eyes. "Fang, I think I'm already starting to turn into a mummy?" the fat man asked, frightened. Pei called his companion a fool. Only then did the boy dare to open his eyes. Looking at his hands, he sighed in relief, and Lianda laughed cheerfully, happy to see he was okay. Fang told his assistants, "It seems that this area is still safe." The boys looked ahead as the fog gradually cleared. Gradually, they could now see high-rise buildings through it. The hero explained to his companions that they needed to continue. Now it was the smart boy's turn to come forward to test the lethality of the fog. This test was successful, and the young man placed the stone on the ground to mark the safe area. The boys walked slowly forward, changing places again and again. Lianda looked very scared each time. Fang did everything calmly and deliberately, hoping that they would get lucky. Pei's arm was not injured again. The man, Gordo, wasn't injured either, and this time the hero got lucky. The boys moved a few steps closer to their objective. Fan decided to advance a few more steps, and, scared, he asked his friend to be very careful. Liang said, "We've been here for an hour, and in that time, we've taken several dozen steps forward. The further we advance, the more dangerous it becomes." The hero looked at him, smiled encouragingly. He realized he needed to be careful, but there was no time to lose. In the next moment, Fan Yang decided to risk his own life, and took several steps forward, at once, quickly disappearing into the mist. Suddenly, the boy stopped short. He saw something incredible ahead. The boys were eager to know what made him stop. Liang remained still. A second later, the officer saw the stranger's credentials. It read, Department of Special Investigations. The name on the credential was Wang Liang. In mythology, and trying to determine if what he was seeing was real, it turned out that they had managed to reach the supermarket, which was actually the city center. Lianta continued his narration. "We picked up some food, and immediately returned the same way we came. At most, we were only 2 or 3 hours behind schedule, so how could 2 days have passed?" All his classmates looked at Fan, waiting for him to explain everything to them. Luxi asked the boy what would ultimately happen to them. The astute Pero looked his friend in the eyes and asked if he understood everything, to which the hero replied that he only had one assumption. Louis wanted to know what that meant. Both boys came to the same conclusion. Perhaps we are trapped not only in space, but also in time. Meanwhile, the hero's mother was still in the laboratory of the Special Research Department, under the supervision of the scientists. Wang and his assistant observed the study. When the two entered the room, the scientist greeted him politely. The man asked the scientist if he had managed to make contact, and the scientist shook his head to indicate no. Wang then said, "It's already been 4 days, and we haven't been able to contact her even once. Isn't she a portal?" the fearful scientist explained. "This temporary connection is actually very unstable," Mito inquired. "We can only measure it, but we can't completely control it. To create a portal, you need some powerful, shared thoughts and memories from both sides," his boss explained. "You need brainwave fluctuations that exceed those of a normal person. But technology can't solve this problem. the detective added. According to the data we have, these two, as mother and son, should be the most suitable candidates. Ni Tao asked if there wasn't anyone else who could create this portal besides them. After thinking about it, Wang Lian said that there was one. Chinese folklore, that's the name of an evil spirit, the police officer asked. This is the Special Investigations Department that never closes criminal cases and has the right to more person. The man raised his hand and pointed to the photo of another young man on the tablet. It could be another person, but in this case, it's much more dangerous, summarized the investigator from the Department of Special Investigations. Meanwhile, the prisoners from the other world were surprised by the conclusion they reached. It turned out that not only space, but also time, was a limiting factor. Their freedom. Outside the fog, time flows differently. This is the only explanation for such a significant difference in perception. Xiao wanted more details, so he asked Fan what I wanted to say. The hero explained that they were not only trapped within the fog, but were also facing the problem of deviating from reality. Meanwhile, the prisoners from the world were stunned by the conclusion they had reached. It turned out that not only space, but also time, limited their freedom. Outside of the fog, time passed in a different way. That was the only explanation for such a big difference in perception. Xiao wanted more details, so he asked Fan what he meant by that. The hero explained that not only we were trapped in the fog, and also faced the problem of deviating from real time. The companions didn't understand what this aberration meant, or if it could affect their return. The class began to panic, fearing they wouldn't be able to leave or return home. The hero tried to calm them down, explaining that panicking in a situation like this was the worst thing they could do. Suddenly, Fan and the others heard wild, unhinged laughter. It was the bound professor, taunting them as if he had completely lost his mind. The man didn't suppress his emotions, and his strange behavior frightened the children even more. Liang approached the professor and pushed him, muttering irritably, "Psycho, what's so funny? Make decisions on the spot." The man continued looking at the documents and thought, how can they send such strange guys like this to deal with such incomprehensible cases? Wang Liang snapped these words from the student finally silenced the man, but seeing the professor's gaze, Liang Ta lost his nerve and hid behind Fan. The man clenched gritted his teeth and said, "I'm laughing at you idiots, because even in a situation like this, you still have hope of returning home. You actually think that finding food will solve everything immediately. Supermarket on the Third Ring Road, maybe that guy is just fooling us all. No matter the space or time, there's absolutely no way to escape this hell." Professor paused for a moment to catch his breath, but then exclaimed, "Now we're just waiting to die together." Looking at the children, he noticed that his words had startled them, but suddenly, a wooden stick was brought close to his face, silencing the madman. This sudden turn of events really frightened the arrogant professor. "Now, there are many problems, but the arrogance keen. The first problem we need to solve is you," Pei stated. These words from the know-it-all truly surprised the man, who gritted his teeth, remaining silent. The boy smiled, pleased with the reaction that it had caused. "This accident made us wander around here with no way to return home, experiencing all kinds of horrors," P said, addressing his companions. "I agree. It is correct. We are all exhausted, myself included." The boy with glasses continued his speech. The children, frightened, watched him with eyes filled with a mixture of terror and hope. "How much longer can we survive here? A week? A month? A year? Nobody knows. In any case, we need to have companions we can trust and support. But also, in moments like this, there are people who do a lot of damage with their selfishness." P threatened the teacher with a baseball bat. "He steals food, beats students, harasses girls." The know-it-all continued. Police officer out of his self-absorption by demanding a report. The officer came to his senses because, despite his displeasure, that subject belonged to the special investigations. Even our dear teacher San was hurt by that bastard. I don't want such a horrible and evil adult among us. He must be punished for everything he has done. P finished his speech. Most of his classmates supported what he said. Everyone wanted to punish the teacher. The unhappy man looked scared and asked the know-it-all, "What are you going to do?" The boy with glasses put a finger to his lips as if he was contemplating a punishment. That gesture alone was enough to fill the professor with wild terror. After a pause, Pei whispered softly, "You should die." The other students began to encourage the boy with glasses to punish the teacher and avenge teacher Sang. The man wanted to say something, but he was too scared. "Yes, he has hurt us all, and hurt everyone, and must certainly pay for what he's done," Pei said. The young man raised the bat and asked his classmates, "Who wants to go first?" It seems that this turn of events was not what the other children were expecting. They looked confused. It turned out that no one was against someone else taking care of the teacher, but they weren't willing to do it themselves either. Xiao, he asked Fanny, there's something weird about PI. Why do you want to do this? The hero remained silent, thinking that responding to his friend LXY would only confuse and scare her. Don't lie. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, Teacher San shouted. What are you going to do? Don't make a mistake. The woman was about to intervene, but someone grabbed her arm. It was Feng, and he asked her to wait. The woman turned and replied, I'm a teacher. I have to stop them. Fang looked frustrated and said, I'm afraid there's nothing you can do now. One of the boys raised the bat, and he was trembling. His fear was evident. The professor, seeing the young man's state, said, You scoundrel, do you think you have the courage? Come on, hit me on the head. If you do, no one will ever threaten you again. Unit. The police showed him the bus involved in the accident. Approximately 10 students and 1 teacher had disappeared. Surveillance cameras in the surrounding area didn't. Brats who eat bread and milk, brought by your parents every day, dare to kill a man? The boy continued trembling, his eyes filled with terror. He dropped the bat, but another person picked it up. He, the one with glasses, returned the gun to his frightened companion. Pei whispered in his ear, You don't want revenge? Do you remember what happened? The one with glasses continued to pressure him, telling him that they were watching and laughing at his indecision. Pei tried to convince the confused young man, It's all the fault of the teacher in front of you. He must be punished. The man was truly terrified. He remained silent and kept his gaze fixed on his executioners. The know-it-all's words seemed to have taken effect. His companion stopped shaking, and his gaze became determined. With firm hands, he raised the bat to strike. Professor Song tried to stop him. Wait, don't do it, she shouted. Pei looked at her with a questioning expression. The woman told him that he was still a student. If you kill the professor, what will you do next? The know-it-all asked him. So, what do we do now? Are we just going to let this trash go? Teacher Sang replied. Let's just tie him up securely and make sure he can hurt anyone again. There's enough food now. P asked the woman if she knew what they had seen on their way out. When she remained silent, he explained, This world is no different from our own. The supermarket is stocked full of products. The boys noticed empty restaurants, impeccably clean, with the lights still on. They saw parks and streets that were clean and orderly, which was very strange, but they didn't encounter people, animals, or any other living creature. The boy with glasses asked the teacher, Do you know what that signifies? In this world, we're the only ones who can protect ourselves. The expression on his face now resembled that of a madman. He approached Teacher Sang and said, Do you want this bastard to be among us all the time, controlling us and intimidating us? Do you really want him to? From the brink, sometime before the accident, the students were riding a large red bus on a school field trip. They were all on the verge of starting high school. The girl with the, Capture them either. It's strange that we haven't found any evidence. It's as if they vanished into thin air, the officer said. The blonde sensed that the police officer was hiding something. Treat us like dogs and humiliate us? P continued to pressure her. The adult seemed bewildered by the words of that know-it-all kid. She couldn't find an appropriate response. Suddenly, the attention of San was interrupted by a loud, recognizable thud. The bespectacled boy's words had served their purpose. A young man wielding a baseball bat brought it down forcefully on the teacher's head. He no longer wore a fearful expression. Instead, a deranged smile stretched across his face. The man collapsed to the ground. The girls couldn't contain their emotions and screamed. The teacher didn't lose consciousness and also screamed loudly in pain. He was suffering immensely. The young man who had struck him continued to smile strangely. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as Pile placed a hand on his shoulder, encouraging him for what he had just done. The boy with glasses told the attacker that now the teacher wouldn't dare to make fun of him anymore. After hearing those words, the bat slipped from the boy's hands, as if only then had he understood the gravity of what he had done. He fell to his knees with a look of desperation on his face. Wang Land. He raised his bat, wanting revenge for the humiliation he had suffered. The boy with the pen wound on his cheek said he had waited long enough. Just then, the teacher, startled, he begged him not to hit him, but his victim felt differently. Without hesitation, the young man brought the bat down on the professor's head, ordering him not to scream. Behind him, many more students were waiting for their turn. Blood began to gush from the professor's head. He couldn't believe what was happening, but his victims no longer hesitated. Hit after hit, the bats came down on him. The others encouraged each other, shouting things like to hit him with all their strength, to hit him in the face, to show no. Then, he confessed that they had discovered a body in such a condition that identification was proving difficult. Its appearance had been altered so drastically that, for the time being, it was impossible to determine the victim's identity. Mercy, and that now it was their turn. P watched silently, satisfied that his plan was working. He witnessed the murder without even blinking. Meanwhile, the Professor Sang was muttering that everything was wrong and that they had to stop. Loxie turned to Fan and asked if there was anything she could do to stop them, because if they continued like this, someone would really die. The hero responded that each of them was a spark, and that fire could provide warmth, but it could also destroy. The flames of the crowd had become a monster that devastated everything in its path. The professor's body barely retained a human form. It was more like a bloody mass. The students observed what they had done. Many were still smiling. P extended the bat toward Fan and told him that it was his turn now. The young man asked if, in the state that the professor was in, his intervention was still necessary. The know-it-all adjusted his glasses and responded that yes, of course. He wanted everyone to see Fan the same way they did. At such an unusual time, they needed to be united. He added that he needed his courage and wisdom. Both young men stared directly into each other's eyes. It was unclear how this confrontation between the two class leaders would end. "The professor is showing signs of life," he whispered, pleading for them to stop, promising that he would never hurt anyone again. The boy with glasses looked at him silently, a chilling smile frozen on his face. He didn't respond. He believed that evil had to be eradicated. He took a step towards the professor and told him that he was about to send him to the next world. The know-it-all raised the bat to deliver the final blow. Professor Sands screamed, unable to believe what she was seeing. Could her students really be this cruel? Wang Long and the other classmates who had participated in the beating simply watched in silence. A forensic examination revealed that the body had sustained at least 277 internal lacerations, and most incredibly, it had mummified in under 6 hours following the incident. Wang smiled as if this brought the bat down forcefully on the professor's head, wishing him to rest in peace. Blood splattered directly onto his face, staining his glasses, but the professor still didn't die. Suddenly, he whispered the word, "cocky." His last words were an accusation. Pei had deceived him. Finally, the boy with glasses dropped the bat, completely calm. He took off his glasses and cleaned the blood off them. Then he turned to the others and told them that they could now get out of there. The companions silently stared at the man's corpse, stunned. It was as if they only then realized what they had done, but in the next moment, the cunning Pei achieved what he was looking for. The teenagers recognized him as someone cool. From the crowd, someone said that the old man had finally died, and that it was lucky that Pei was with them, because otherwise they didn't know what would have happened. Fong remained silent with a worried expression frozen on his face. The companions began to take their first steps into the fog, hoping to escape that trap as soon as possible. W. Lang was the first. He took a few steps before abruptly stopping. He had seen something that made him freeze. Then, after regaining his composure, he finally managed to say, "The others also saw what he had seen." Xiao muttered in confusion, agreeing that Fawn was right. Lucy, who was behind Aya, brought her hand to her mouth, stunned. The fog began to dissipate, and the boys saw that they were indeed in the Boer City H. The teenagers ran forward, believing they would be able to return home soon, unaware that they were in a different reality. P advised them not to go into the light, from the fog, so that everyone would be safe. The know-it-all seemed happy, truly believing that all their difficulties were behind them. Fang cautiously asked his companion. Information was intriguing to him. The police officer approached the unusual pair and inquired if they could locate any evidence. Just then, a distressed woman rushed towards the tape that, if he wasn't afraid that something else might happen. P responded that, after so much sadness, they needed to let them relax a little and release some tension. Meanwhile, the boys entered. Running to the supermarket, they were overwhelmed by the sheer variety of products and started grabbing everything they could. One of the young men quickly tore open a bag of potato chips. Tears welled up in his eyes. They had never tasted so delicious before. One man commented that it was too much food and that even all of them together couldn't eat it in a month. One of the boys offered chocolate to a classmate he had liked for a long time, but the girl brushed his hand away, and the candy fell to the floor. Annoyed, the classmate told him that he was only remembering her now, and that thanks to everything, she had realized what he was really like. She glanced at the boy with glasses and added that, compared to an egoist like him, Piro was the hero of the class. Now, all the girls thought that the intelligent boy was an incredibly attractive savior. They surrounded the boy with glasses and praised him endlessly. Luxie asked Fan Yang why he was being so distant. The young man remained. Silently, he kept his eyes fixed on Pyradoras. The hero was deep in thought. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind. In the next moment, he asked his colleagues were asked to take out their phones. Xiao was surprised by this request. After all, none of them had a signal. But Fan repeated his request with a confident tone. The girls exchanged glances, confused by Fan's request. They hesitated for a moment. When they finally took out their phones, they saw that the time and date displayed were different. The hero confirmed his suspicion. The young man said, "It's really as I thought. We don't just feel these changes in time. Time itself is actually different." Loxi asked, confused. "But what could that mean?" Fan responded that he cordoned off the scene, screaming and attempting to enter, refusing to accept that her son was dead. The mother was no longer able to contain her emotions. Tears streamed from her eyes as she pleaded. Didn't fully understand it yet either. The only thing clear to him was that their class was trapped in a different city. Luxi repeated the question, completely bewildered. Suddenly, everyone was startled by the sound of a bottle being uncorked. Someone had opened a bottle of wine and was pouring it into a glass. It was P, sitting in a chair, and enjoying a glass of alcohol. The clever boy told his companions that the wine was excellent. Glass in hand, P looked at Fan through the glass and thought, "Fang, a new scene is about to begin." P wanted the young man to finally make a decision. Suddenly, the teenagers heard a scream. Luxi, Xiao, and Fan Yang looked in the direction of the sound. It turned out to be Lian Ta, who was on the ground clutching some sweets while one of his classmates kicked him. Nobody came to the chubby boy's defense. Everyone watched the beating in silence. Some children looked scared and surprised by the situation. The young man who was mocking and humiliating Lian Ta shouted, "You're so fat. All you ever do is eat, and eat, and eat." The unfortunate man cried out in pain and humiliation as he apologized to his tormentor. The thug prepared to strike him again, wanting to take everything he had, but the fist never reached its target. This time, Fan Yang decided to intervene, intercepting the aggressor's arm and forcefully squeezing his wrist, forcing him to stop. Then, he threw him against a supermarket shelf. Furious, the thug yelled, "Fan, what the hell are you doing?" The hero calmly replied, "The question is for you. What were you about to do?" "Do?" the other explained. "That fat guy took my can, the one that was right here, so I told him to give it back." "What else did you want?" Xiao interjected. "Is this your family's store?" "Why?" "With the police, to allow her onto the bus." The police officer, turning to the agents from the Special Investigations Department who were observing the scene, remarked, "Can't others take it?" The abuser shouted back, "That's none of your business. I saw it first, so it's mine." That response only infuriated her partner even more. Fan asked Xiao to step aside. He calmed down. Then, he cast a serious look at everyone present. The children were confused and watched him attentively, waiting for what he was going to say. Finally, Fan said, "Do you really think that you are already safe? As long as the city is shrouded in fog and we have no communication with the outside world, danger can appear at any moment." Then he addressed the aggressor. "Do you really think that in a situation like this we should be fighting amongst ourselves?" But the boy didn't agree. With a smile, he replied, "Don't be so paranoid. What could possibly happen?" Then, one of the colleagues who was in the back decided to support Fan. It was P. The boy with glasses said, "I think Fan is right. As I said before, the more time we spend here, the more united we must be. Even though there are many supplies, we must understand a simple truth. They can run out. That's why it's necessary to ration the food." The hero didn't respond. He just looked worried. To the cunning one. A colleague stated that she agreed with Pei. A slender blonde named Senyu also decided to support him. Luxi and Xiao looked at her in surprise. They didn't like this girl's sudden appearance. They remembered how she had pretended to be sick. The girls believed that people's true personalities were revealed in moments like these. Senyu said, "Any group needs a core, a team of leadership to prevent everything from descending into chaos." After the previous crisis, it became clear who possessed the necessary skills. According to her, Pei should be the core of the group. The boy with glasses smiled slightly. He liked hearing those words. Other colleagues also voiced their support for him. "Yes, Pei is the most suitable to lead. I'll feel at ease if he's in charge," said a voice. "But then, I heard that this woman lived alone with her only son. I can't imagine what she must be feeling right now." Wang Liang didn't respond, but carefully followed the woman with his gaze. Just then, he heard another voice. "There's another person who also deserves to lead." It was the same boy who had been bothering the chubby kid. He shouted, "We're all in the same class, so why should I have to listen to him?" "To him?" Fang countered with a question. We're all in the same class, so why is it that you get to keep a can of food and a tire? The bully was speechless, and he just clenched. He clenched his teeth angrily and walked away without a word. P stood behind Fan Yang, silently observing him. His gaze was so intense that the hero could feel it on the back of his neck. The boy with glasses said nothing, but judging by his expression, he was plotting something. Shortly after, the group ventured out into the city. Predictably, the girls were drawn to the clothing and accessories. One classmate said to another, "This is the first time I've ever touched a Gucci bag. It's like a dream come true." Senju emerged from the fitting room. The other girls excitedly told her that the outfit looked absolutely perfect on her. She looked like a Hollywood star. Luxie decided to step in, saying, "This isn't right. What if someone else finds out about this?" But based on the other girls' reactions, they didn't agree with his words. One of them retorted, "Anyone else? Do you see anyone else here?" Another added, "If you're scared, don't take anything, but you have no right to tell us what to do." Senjo smiled and said, "I don't mind. Speak to our beauty like that. After all, Loxie doesn't need to dress up to look beautiful." She then added, "No, but if I were you, I would probably want to look as beautiful as possible, in front of the boy I like." Those words from the tuta struck a chord. Loxie's gaze returned to the dresses hanging in the shop window. Xiao noticed that her friend was hesitating, so he called her over. Meanwhile, the boys had found something resembling an internet cafe. The classmates decided to turn on the computers and play games to distract themselves from the situation. He spoke to his partner, Mitao, whose name means peach. "From now on, keep track of every family of the missing students," he added. "Every moment, every hour, wherever they were in." Payne didn't sit with the others at the table. Instead, he was about to leave. Mon turned to the intelligent young man and asked him why he didn't want to play, since they were one person short, a player. The boy with glasses looked around and replied with a smile that he couldn't play alone. Fang was alone on the balcony, observing the city from atop a building. Suddenly, he heard a voice saying, "How naive, aren't they?" The young man looked around and saw Pei holding a glass. The cunning man offered Fang a drink, but he refused, saying he didn't drink alcohol. Pei rested his glass on the railing and told Fang Yang that, deep down, he knew perfectly well what was happening. Most still didn't understand what had happened. They didn't have enough knowledge about the possible risks or similar situations they had already experienced, but there was also a hidden benefit. They were living in an empty place. What did that mean? Pei answered himself, saying that the others didn't understand, but Fang Yang understood it perfectly. The boy was acting strangely. It seemed that the power he had obtained had corrupted him. He extended his hand over the city, smiling like a deranged genie. Then he clenched his fist, as if to demonstrate that he was in control of the situation. Fan carefully observed every look and gesture of his companion. The one with glasses looked away from the city and stared at him intently, waiting for some kind of reaction. Suddenly, Fan responded that he was not interested in talking about the subject. The hero turned around and walked away without paying any more attention to Pei, the know-it-all. He was left alone on the roof, lost in his own thoughts. He didn't like that his partner didn't continue the conversation. In his annoyance, he squeezed the glass so hard that it shattered. Then he looked at his hand in bewilderment. He was clearly, I don't want there to be any blind spots. Fang's mother was still trying to get to the scene of the tragedy. Mitao told her superior that she understood everything. The woman couldn't. Frustrated at not having received support from Fan, night fell upon the city. The lights of the high-rise hotel building were lit. The teenagers rested on soft beds. Senyu said. She was relaxing in a bathtub filled with bubbles and rose petals. Liang spent the day in bed, fondly remembering her delicious dinner. Xiao was alone in her room, her anxious thoughts. They wouldn't allow her to rest. She was worried about her friend, who had not yet returned. While some rested, others wandered through the empty supermarket. A hand reached towards a flashlight. It was our protagonist. The young man wasn't ready to take a vacation. He hoped to find answers to his questions. He took out his backpack and began searching for something, with determination. Suddenly, he felt that he was not alone. He saw a shadow out of the corner of his eye. At first, he didn't recognize who was hiding in the shadows like a thief, but when he looked through the window of the shop, he saw Luxie. The young man recognized her immediately and was surprised to see her at that hour. The girl kept thinking about her companion's words. Like a thief, he had sneaked into a clothing store and stood motionless in front of a mannequin wearing a dress, wondering if he should do it or not. Senju's words echoed in his mind. If I were you, I would want to show the best version of myself in front of the boy I like. Luxie still didn't dare to touch the clothes she liked. Finally, the desire to please overcame her common sense, and she reached out her hand to take the dress from the mannequin. Suddenly, she was startled to hear a voice calling her name. She was surprised to see Fan Yang. The hero asked her what she was doing there in the middle of the night. Luxie explained that she couldn't sleep, so she decided to go for a walk. Then she asked him what he was doing there, especially with a backpack on his shoulder. Fang replied that it was nothing special, that control herself. The stress and despair she was suffering made her behavior as a mother uncontrollable. Now, let's go back to when the classmates realized he was just gathering essential things. It was still dangerous to be there. The girl told him that he shouldn't be alone, and added that he was always so calm and trustworthy, and that those were good qualities in a man. He reminded her that he had saved her, and she asked if he planned to protect her all the time. The hero felt uncomfortable with the girl's closeness. Luxie noticed his reaction and took a step back, looking somewhat confused. Suddenly, the young man stepped forward and covered her mouth with his hand. He asked her to remain silent while he listened intently. He sensed that something wasn't right. After a few seconds, he removed his hand from the girl's face. Luxie blushed and whispered, "Fang, what's wrong, Fang?" The hero whispered that he thought there was someone outside and told her to come closer. The teenagers took a few steps back and saw someone in a dark cloak walk past the store. They looked around, bewildered. What they had just witnessed was very strange. They realized that the man had exited the supermarket. Fang thought, "How odd. It's not raining, but he's wearing a raincoat." The boy and girl. They left the clothing store and headed towards the supermarket entrance. The young man hesitated for a moment, sensing a strange odor. Luxie noticed the worried expression on his face and asked what was the matter. A moment later, Fang realized that something was wrong. Through the store's glass door, they could see flames. The door opened. Our hero entered the store. The hero asked Luxie to go get help as quickly as possible. He remembered that he had seen a fire extinguisher nearby. He ran towards where it should have been, but he didn't find it. He thought, "How strange. I'm sure it was here." He became desperate. He trusted his memory, which meant someone had removed it on purpose. Fang ran towards the microphone, told her audience, "Why don't we take advantage of this rare opportunity?" She wanted to guide her classmates toward a moment of truth, so everyone on the bus would reveal their deepest desire. Something was happening to the bus. An unknown force lifted it and held it in the air, shaking it as if it weighed nothing. Fang saw these images as if they were a door to look for a water source. Upon reaching the back room, he saw a crane. Next to it was a bucket. He realized that this was his only way to save the food. Meanwhile, Luxie, he managed to get to the hotel and woke up his companions, alerting them that the supermarket was on fire. LXY yelled that everyone needed to go and help extinguish the flames. They arrived at the scene and were stunned by the magnitude of the fire. One of the boys suggested they go get water, saying there was a communal bathroom nearby. Everyone worked together, trying to save the only source of food they had. The girls moved just as quickly as the boys, carrying buckets of water. Fan was helping like everyone else, but suddenly noticed that it wasn't working. The water they were throwing on the fire was only making it worse. The young people didn't understand why this was happening or what they should do. Fang paused to think. The young hero noticed that something was wrong. Suddenly, an idea crossed his mind. He thought, "Why didn't the fire alarm go off? Is it broken?" Without further explanation, he shouted to the others to close the door. Some didn't understand why. They had to do it. P shouted for them to obey Fang, or they would die from smoke inhalation. One of the girls ran to the automatic doors and pressed the button to close them. At that same moment, the black smoke filled the supermarket. Everyone started coughing, barely able to breathe. Someone asked the hero if everything was going according to plan. The young man answered no and clenched his fists. Hoping his idea would work, Fang covered his mouth with his hand and looked hopefully at the smoke detector on the ceiling. A moment later, his hope was fulfilled. The sprinklers were activated, and water began falling from the ceiling onto the fire. Although the place was large, there was enough water to control the flames. Finally, the fire was movie and thought it couldn't be real. He heard someone repeating his name over and over again. The hero opened his eyes, but he was still having trouble focusing his vision. Suddenly, he heard a voice. "Fang. Finally you woke up." Extinguished, and the boys were able to go out for fresh air. P felt it was time to assess the losses. Many products had been destroyed by the flames. Fang went to check the remaining provisions. He surveyed the charred shelves, attempting to deduce who was responsible. While the others sighed in relief, he pressed on with his investigation. Leanda was bothered by all the food that was lost. One of their companions was clutching his head, unable to comprehend how such a thing could have occurred. Everything had been fine during the day. How could a fire have started? Suddenly, Fang responded that there was nothing surprising about it. Someone had deliberately started the fire. He paused, as he hadn't revealed everything yet. Then, he spoke loudly for everyone to hear. The person responsible for the fire was one of them. Someone had done it on purpose. He wondered what their motive was. The companions fell silent, confused by the accusation. One of them exclaimed that this was impossible, that the food belonged to everyone, and destroying it benefited no one. Who would be stupid enough to do something like that? The teenagers began to eye each other suspiciously, trying to identify the culprit. Then, Fan stated that whoever started the fire left evidence. There were cologne bottles scattered in the fire zone that didn't belong in the food section. The hero confirmed that this was the source of the fire. The culprit ignited the cologne near the shelves to start the fire, then returned to the hotel and blended in with the group that rushed to extinguish it. Fan spoke with the certainty of someone who knew what they were talking about. One of the boys exclaimed that, based on that logic, the culprit must be the one who smelled strongly of cologne. Fan Yang didn't respond. He sat next to one of the bottles and carefully smelled it. He explained that cologne evaporates quickly in heat and that the dense smoke from the fire must have masked its ferment. The teenager clutched his head. It felt heavy and it hurt. He thought, those voices are Xiao and Lucy's. Why do they sound so far away? The young man wanted to lean on the bed to get up. Scent. Suddenly, the chubby guy exclaimed that he remembered something. He pointed to a classmate who had insulted him earlier that day and insisted that he had clearly smelled a strong smell of cologne lingered in the air. The defendant yelled at them to leave him alone, insisting they were only saying that because of what happened that afternoon. But someone placed a hand on his shoulder and said he needed to learn a lesson. It was Peace who spoke up. He stated that, unfortunately, he too had smelled that fragrance. The defendant looked around, disbelieving what he was hearing. He appeared desperate. He then cast a furtive glance towards the door, searching for an escape route. He instantly took off running, but Onin immediately gave chase. He was fast. Within a few steps, he caught up to the suspect, seized him by the collar of his shirt, and violently threw him to the ground. The others followed them outside, relieved that they had apprehended the culprit, even though they didn't truly understand why he had done it, or even if it was really him. Fan Yang suggested that perhaps he felt humiliated and then enraged by what had occurred that afternoon. Pei commented that he found the whole situation disgusting. The young accused man screamed, out of rage, feeling like everyone was against him. He defended Fan, saying he meant well and knew about his secret plans. Annoyed, one of the classmates questioned why Fan Yang and Luxi, they were at the scene of the fire so late at night, which others agreed seemed very suspicious. The boy insisted that when he arrived, he saw Fan Yang's backpack sitting on the counter. He was certain that the hero intended to steal something valuable from the supermarket. He looked at Fan Yang with distrust, then turned around, and as he walked away towards the market, said, over his shoulder, that he was going to get his backpack. Upon reaching it, he opened his classmate's backpack and found food, a powerful flashlight, and a box inside. The other boys approached, their eyes wide, but he felt no support. Fang realized that he was falling into the void. In the next instant, he landed on a hard surface, painfully hitting his back. He saw open in surprise. Even Luxi, who was in love with the hero, was perplexed. The classmates began to bombard Fan Yang with questions. Why are you doing all of this? What are you planning to do? He shifted his gaze toward the hero, wanting an answer. The teenagers kept their eyes fixed on Fan, awaiting an explanation about the contents of his backpack. Suddenly, everyone was shaken by a burst of thunderous laughter. The boy accused of arson exclaimed, "I told you all, that bastard is up to no good." One man placed his hand on his shoulder. He asked him to calm down. P adjusted his glasses, about to speak. The know-it-all boy wanted to hear Fan explain the contents of his backpack. All eyes were focused on the hero, but he remained silent. Even the boy's close friend, Xiao, was surprised by his attitude. The hero remained silent, closed his eyes, and tried to organize his thoughts. He exhaled deeply and finally said, "I'm leaving this place. That's all." Xiao was stunned by her friend's decision. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The man with glasses remained silent for a moment. Momentarily pondering how to respond, Fan finally said, "I know you're worried, but who wouldn't want to get out of here as soon as possible? If there's a problem, we can solve it together." The hero replied to the know-it-all, "That's not necessary." The young man grabbed his backpack and added, "I'll manage on my own." But suddenly, someone blocked the supermarket exit. It was the blonde girl, Senju. Angrily, she said, "Do you think you can just leave whenever you want?" And she pointed to the remaining food. "We've already lost so much food, and now you're taking what little is left. You're the one adding fuel to the fire, Fan." He wasn't going to explain anything, but this turn of events displeased the furious Senju immensely. She yelled at the hero, "The truth is, I found you suspicious from the very beginning. Every time something happens," his companions. He closed his eyes to calm the pain after the fall. Lucy ran towards him with tears in her eyes. The girl hugged the hero, happy that he was okay. Fang didn't understand. "Like this, you remain so calm, as if it has nothing to do with you." The girl continued her accusations. Zen thought this behavior could only mean one thing. "Fan Yang, I knew everything beforehand." The boy with the purple hair was stunned upon hearing those words. Now, the companions were becoming hostile toward the hero. Xiao decided to intervene, saying, "You don't understand. You don't understand anything about life, Senju. If it weren't for Fan Yang, we would still be trapped in that thick fog without any food." Liang Da also decided to support the hero, adding, "That's right, and if Brother Fang hadn't found the evidence, this guy would have gotten away with it," Senju replied. "Who knows why he did all this?" he continued. "But you, dear friends, have been licking Fan Yang's shoes from the beginning. Taking sides within a group isn't right, in my opinion," the blonde added. Pei intervened in the conversation. "Enough!" he ordered the girl. She looked at him furiously, but he stood firm. His gaze through his glasses was sharp as a razor. The know-it-all managed to silence Senue, although she didn't accept it gladly. "It seems that you have taken a unbreakable decision," Pei said, looking at Fan. The hero replied, "I didn't have any other plan." From the very beginning, the man with glasses pretended to agree with his companion's decision. "I realize that many of you have your own ideas. In fact, I already discussed this problem with Fan," Pei said. The hero looked at him and managed to catch his barely perceptible smile. "While, let's stay safe for now, however, someone else needs to investigate the surroundings," Pei continued. "I will respect your decision, whether you want to stay or not," the wise boy summarized. "But if someone tries to undermine the collective interest, like he did, I will not tolerate it," he added in a serious tone. For a while, everyone present remained silent, each one deciding what had happened to them. He was visibly stunned. He asked his friends where they were and what had happened to the others. Xiao looked at Lucy with a questioning expression. Neither of them knew to move forward with their lives. Suddenly, someone intervened. "I'm going with Fan too." It was Xiao. The girl seemed determined. The other companions were surprised by Xiao's decision. The young woman added, "Fan Yangan, it's too dangerous for you to go on a trip like that alone. We can take care of each other if I come with you." LXI was surprised by her friend's decision. She felt too weak to stay with her classmates and friends, but she was also very scared to decide to go with them. Li hesitated, trying to make a decision, and pulled at the bow on her dress. Finally, LXE exclaimed that she would also go with them. Fan Yang said, "I don't know what awaits us outside, and I can't guarantee your safety." The young man thought it would be better for the girls to stay with the others. LXY wanted to object to something, but couldn't. Senjo smiled and called the beauty a coward. Xiao Xiao exhaled deeply and said, "Okay, but don't try to change your mind." She added that there was no way she would change her decision. At that moment, the frightened Lian Da was trying to make a momentous decision. The young man thought, "Fawn is the only one who can protect me. If I stay, I'll definitely be oppressed by the others." But the cowardly young man wasn't used to risking his life either, so he hesitated. In the end, the fear of being harassed, he overcame his fear for his own life, and the fat man raised his hand. "I want to go with Fan too," he said. The others instantly burst out laughing. "There's the third one. It's lucky he decided to leave because he won't be eating our food anymore," one of the boys commented. Lianta took a few steps towards those who weren't laughing at him, but he didn't comment on his companion's actions. He simply observed the situation in silence. Then he looked around at the other companions and asked if anyone else wanted to join. One of the boys decided to go exploring with what to say. Finally, the lilac-haired girl pointed upwards and explained that the others were on the surface. Her response didn't clarify anything for the hero, but then she continued with the small group. But he made it clear that he had one condition. Whoever decides to go must bring enough water and food to last at least 2 days. The others weren't very willing to accept that condition, but the young man with glasses knew how to convince them, promising, "If we find more resources, we'll come back and let you know." P smiled, and everyone agreed to the condition, confirming they had a deal. Suddenly, Professor Sang appeared outside the supermarket, asking, "Is everything all right? How did the supermarket catch fire so late at night?" She approached each of the children, asking if anyone had been injured. P responded, "Everything's fine now, Mi-sang. I'll update you." The students began to whisper, "What's wrong with Mrs. our teacher?" There was so much noise at the hotel, but she didn't hear anything. How unreliable is that? Upon learning that some disciples wanted to go on a reconnaissance mission, the professor questioned whether Sion was certain about his decision. The woman was unsure how she should act in this situation, even though she was the only adult among the students. She appeared both confused and frustrated. Fang responded, "In such unique circumstances, it's better to have a leader than to become lost and vanish like sand scattered by the wind." "Scattered by the wind," the teacher replied, expressing her worry. "We've only just settled in, and you're already going somewhere else." At that moment, Sang exclaimed, "Maybe I should go with you, too." But the hero objected, stating, "There are students remaining here. Compared to us, they need your attention more." The woman closed her eyes, knowing she was saying the correct words. The hero added, already addressing the rest of their companions, "We'll return to the hotel, pack our bags tonight, and leave tomorrow morning." The following morning, he looked in the direction she was pointing and saw the others. At first glance, it seemed as if they were sleeping. The girls explained that they had also been like that until they woke up, which the teenagers. Everyone gathered again to say their goodbyes. P wished Fang and his friends good luck with their investigation. The hero looked around and replied, "Then we're off." The team of the boys embarked on their adventure while the remaining companions watched them silently. Sen quietly asked P, "Are you sure this will work?" But he didn't have time to respond before Wan Lang, who was behind him, called out to him. He wanted to know from his leader what to do with the person who burned down the supermarket. P remained silent, appearing to be contemplating a punishment for the culprit. The bound man trembled with terror, awaiting his punishment. The bespectacled man decided to torture him by taking his time to respond. In the end, he said, "Give him a little fire, if he likes it that much." Meanwhile, the investigation team wandered through the foggy city streets. One of the boys began to complain, "We've been walking for hours. Where are we going?" Fan, the hero, responded without looking back, "We are going towards the east side of the city." The girls, who were also participating in this expedition, seemed scared and tired. Xiao said to his friend, "We've been walking so much. Let's take a break." "All right." Fang looked at the screen of his smartphone, unable to believe they had walked for 3 hours. The young man looked around and spotted a cafe on the sidewalk. He suggested that his companions sit there for a while. Xiao looked into her backpack and asked her friend Loxi, "Are you hungry? Let's eat. Now, because we don't know what will happen next," the girl added. Another classmate, who had also gone on the expedition with them, asked if she could sit with them. Xiao called her captain and hastily allowed her to sit at their table. The blonde responded that they weren't in training at the moment and asked her to call her Injo. Xiao asked his girlfriend Luxi. Saw was difficult to describe. His friends appeared to be floating in space, as if they were in the cosmos. Luxi asked Fan Yang with a trembling voice, "Is it possible that we are dead? Remember when you were afraid to talk to the captain? Why don't you try it now?" The beauty blushed at such a suggestion. While the girls were talking, some of the boys, they observed intently. The young man was captivated by Xiao's short hair, Luxi's delicate features, and Injo's flawless figure. One of their companions hid his face behind the camera lens. The young man blushed. Gazing at the beauties, he decided that this expedition was worthwhile after all. Liangta approached the photographer and inquired, "Liamu, are you still taking photos?" "Even in this situation," the young man responded, "Don't you realize, it's under these conditions that the most stunning portraits can be captured. I'll post them on my personal blog when we get home." The boy was already envisioning the comments from his followers and dreaming of the fame he would achieve. Lianda found it repulsive. It even sent shivers down his spine. Lianda called Liamu a pervert, but the latter took it as a compliment. Meanwhile, the other members of the expedition decided to take a break for a snack as well. Fang. He seemed anxious, feeling responsible for all the colleagues who had decided to leave with him. The young man was so deep in thought that he even jumped when he heard his name called and someone asking what he was doing. A classmate with glasses suggested, "I think you're watching the food they're setting out." The hero looked back and replied, "Chenu, what are your thoughts on this?" The young man replied, "After seeing what happened to our teacher, I secretly conducted similar experiments. Unfortunately, we can't limit the changes when time itself isn't the standard. Therefore, we won't be able to obtain a reliable result." Fang lowered his gaze, but didn't comment on Chenu's words in any way. That assumption chilled the three of them to the bone. The hero didn't want to believe such a terrifying idea. They couldn't be dead. At that moment, the other companions began to wake up, but the man wasn't finished speaking. "I found something in the fog. Here it is." The boy placed a square object covered in notes on the table. The hero asked, "Is this really a portable air detector?" Chen smiled and replied, "Ah, You're very clever, Fan explained. Generally, smog is a broad term used to define various particles that exceed the permissible limits in the atmosphere. Among them, sulfur dioxide and PM 2.5 are the most well known. But strangely, the fog here seems to have a different cause than the usual ones, the hero agreed. In fact, the sulfur dioxide reading has been normal the entire time. Fang waited for Chenu to express his conclusions. The boy took what he had found and observed it carefully. Then he put it in his backpack and said, "If we were at my uncle's institute right now, with all those professional instruments, I'm sure I could analyze the components of the mist." The hero asked, "Is that why you came with us?" Chen nodded and asked why Fan wanted to go to the east of the city. The boy couldn't think of an answer immediately, or he simply didn't want to share his thoughts just yet. Fang mentioned he had something he needed to check on. Meanwhile, back at the investigation division office, Specials, Wang was sitting at his desk with his feet up, deep in thought. Another man was reading the news. The first headline read, "Storis supermarket engulfed in flames. Late at night, no casualties." The second headline read, "Numerous products vanish suddenly from storage supermarket in Radstar shopping center." Just then, Hang Liang heard his assistant, Mu Tao, approaching. The boss inquired about the progress of the investigation. Mu Tao replied that there was nothing new to report, no breakthroughs as of yet. Hang, smiling, the boys, who were a bit chubby, exclaimed, "I want to be as thin as lightning." Another young man dreamed of surpassing everyone in school and reaching the top. The kids loved the idea and fall to the ground. The teenagers gradually regained consciousness and wondered how it was possible that they had fallen from the sky. Fang realized that they were in a difficult situation, advised his assistant not to worry, reassuring her that they had plenty of time. The girl responded, "But without the gate, we have no other way of knowing what's happening inside. Normally, once the initial fear of an unfamiliar environment subsides, some of our experimental subjects, those with ideas and the motivation to act, should begin to take action," the boss explained. "Based on the tracks those boys are leaving, it's not hard to figure out what they're up to," the man added. Maito asked, "Aren't you worried they might move faster than we anticipate?" Wang advised the beauty not to worry. When time loses its standard, the concepts of fast and slow become meaningless. Suddenly, something on the monitor caught the attention of the Special Investigations representative. The next moment, he heard his phone ringing in his pocket. Answering it, the man asked what had happened. When he hung up, Mu asked him, "Is he from our organization? What happened?" Wang Liang jumped out of his chair without responding to the assistant. LX tried to stop him, to question him, but it was all in vain. Just as he reached the door, the young man responded to the assistant. "They found a new body," Wandel said with an odd smile. Meanwhile, the research team's journey continued onward. They arrived at the city's impoverished and dilapidated districts. Lianga was displeased by the harsh wind and felt uneasy. Fan Yang produced a map and informed his companions that the path ahead of them would be short. According to their preliminary plan, they could occasionally stop by a supermarket or convenience store. The hero explained that food wouldn't be an issue in that case, but there was a moment he dreaded. The team continued on their path with Fan leading the group. The photographer, Lia Mun, didn't put down his camera and snapped pictures at every turn. He dreamed. Serious. They had to do something to figure out what was happening to them. A bench materialized out of nowhere, and the class representative climbed on top of it, calling out to his classmates. He told them not to. Of becoming incredibly popular as soon as they got out of there. Suddenly, the young man heard a sound that startled him greatly. Fan shouted from somewhere ahead, where the fog was thickening. Accumulated. "Who's there?" The boys behind him didn't understand what was happening. Liamu insisted that he had seen a figure walking. The children couldn't understand how that was possible, since most of them didn't see. No one but their companions. Someone suggested that the photographer had taken so many photos that he was hallucinating, but Liamu was willing to swear that he really had seen a dark figure. He told the others that he wanted to check it out. "You guys go on ahead, I'll catch up with you later." The friends decided to leave the paranoid guy alone and continued onward. Meanwhile, the photographer began to look around through the lens of his camera. The young man was scared because everything around him seemed so abandoned. Suddenly, Liamu realized that the fog around him was getting thicker and thicker. The boy swallowed hard. He wanted to catch up with the others as quickly as possible. He remembered what the professor had told them about. Fog before his death implied that these seemingly natural phenomena could be genuinely dangerous. Touching the fog with his finger, the young man examined his own hand, wondering if he had imagined it. But suddenly, the photographer detected a strange odor, which frightened him even more. Taking another step, he saw a large red stain on the ground and the wall of a house through the fog. Only then did Lijiamu realized that he had smelled blood just seconds before. The young man approached to take a photo of the stains, knowing his classmates wouldn't believe him otherwise. The photographer thought, how? After all, there shouldn't be anyone here besides us. The boy couldn't tear his shocked gaze away from the stains. They looked truly horrific, and there was a foul odor as well. They should panic, and to call the police immediately. He asked if anyone had a phone that was still working. The hero pulled his cell phone from his pocket, but there was no signal. The other teenagers. In the next moment, Lee Jiamu's attention was drawn to a camera lying on the ground. A little further ahead, the young man froze, because that camera looked exactly like the one he owned. Her. The young man bent down to examine her carefully. He saw bloodstains on the chamber and was about to bend down to pick it up when suddenly, the hero heard some sounds that frightened him even more than bloodstains. There really is someone else here, a murderer lurking in the mist, Liamu thought. This place is very strange. I need to find a place to hide. The frightened young man pressed himself against the wall, trying to stay as quiet as a mouse. He heard some screams coming from the fog, but he couldn't understand anything. The photographer began to shake like a poplar leaf. Suddenly, the young man heard footsteps approaching quickly and thought with fear, "They are coming this way." The footsteps turned into a run. A few more seconds, and the strangers would be right beside him. The photographer sat on the ground and tried not to breathe so as not to be heard. Liamu gritted her teeth and tried to blend in with the. Judging by the sound, it seemed people had passed by, but they didn't notice the boy. The photographer couldn't believe his luck. They were really gone. Sweat poured down his face, soaking his hair. Covering his face, he raised the camera and realized he'd accidentally pressed the button. The young man then realized he might have taken a photo of the people who had just run past. Liamu pressed a button and saw his companions on the camera screen. The photographer couldn't believe what he was seeing. How could this be possible? Suddenly, he remembered the camera he had recently seen on the ground. After standing there for a while longer, the young man finally decided to come out of his hiding place and took a few steps towards. Gave the same response. The boys exchanged confused glances. It was as if something diabolical was taking place. None of the phones had a signal. One of the boys turned to Pisk and said, "You read a lot." Forward, leaned down, and reached for the camera. Picking it up, the boy wanted to see the last shots taken. His hands were trembling. The photographer's eyes were fixed on his forehead when he saw the photo he had just taken on his camera. Meanwhile, the rest of the group continued their journey, relieved that there was supposed to be a store up ahead. One of his companions said, "We've finally arrived. That hypocrite, Sin, with his delicious food, only gave us this garbage." Xiao asked Fulon where Liamo was. Since he had been following them, the young man replied, "Liamo heard something along the way and said he wanted to check it out, which is why he stayed behind. He's a photographer, so apparently he's even happy about the situation." Fan said to the others, "It's dangerous in the fog. How could you let him go alone?" Fulon exclaimed in his defense. "What could we do? He wanted to go there on his own." Another young man said, "Come on, it's not okay. We really should have stopped him. Wait for us at the store. We'll find him and come back here. Besides, I need to use the restroom. I've been holding it for so long already." Time. He pulled his companion along behind him, heading in the direction the photographer had taken. Loxi asked Fan Jan if the boys would be all right. The hero responded that he still didn't quite understand how the fog actually worked. He hadn't finished speaking when everyone present heard horrible screams. The next moment, the companions heard the sound of footsteps, and they saw the boys rapidly approaching. They only stopped when they saw their group, who were waiting for some kind of explanation. Leonta, terrified, said, "It wasn't following us." The boys looked frightened. One had a visible bloodstain on his jacket, a fact that couldn't be hidden from Fan's watchful gaze. The young people couldn't catch their breath. They looked. "Can you tell us what is going on?" The intelligent one assumed they were in the worst possible situation. He told the teenagers not to panic and to trust him. "I think we are on." Very scared. Suddenly, Xiao shouted, "They're trying to escape." One of the boys was grabbed by his partner by the shirt. It was the captain, and she exclaimed, "Quick, tell me, what happened? Did you see?" "Li Guillermo, why is there blood on you?" Fulon trembled throughout his entire body, his teeth clenched tightly. He couldn't utter a single word. Another young man sat down and covered his head with his hands, and kept repeating, "We didn't want to do it, we didn't want to do it." Cheno looked at Fan Yang, awaiting his reaction, but the young man remained silent. Finally, he told everyone to stop panicking. They needed to resolve things calmly. The hero asked the frightened young man to recount what happened in the fog. Fulon was so scared that he only repeated the question, "Tell me, what happened?" The captain was beginning to lose patience and continued holding the boy by the bars. The terrified young man couldn't calm his emotions and refused to tell what they had seen. Inju wanted to know where the blood on the young man's jacket came from. The beautiful girl was behaving aggressively. Shanu put his hand on the girl's shoulder and asked her to calm down. Those words, his partner's comments, really had an effect. The captain realized she had overreacted and finally released the boy, who was already quite frightened. Meanwhile, so much so that Fulon collapsed to his knees with a frantic smile on his face. The young man kept repeating that he didn't want to do this, but he finally composed himself and began his story. When the boys separated from the group, they walked in the direction the photographer had gone. Fulon pointed out the direction his friend Ligiamo had taken. The boys were walking down a Belyundaksa, ramshackle street, trying to see something through the fog. One of them remarked to the other that the fog seemed thicker from a distance. Suddenly, one of them smelled blood. Fulon said to his 6-year-old, "The police station is right nearby. Who knows the area well enough to go report the accident?" One of the boys raised his hand, but the wise one advised him not to worry. Pisk looked at the fawn. "Partner, this place is terrible. Why do we have to do this?" The next moment, something truly shocked the boys, and one of them screamed loudly. It turned out that the boys were frightened when they saw their own companion, Liamu, unexpectedly emerging from the mist directly in front of them. The boys asked why he hadn't caught up with them and was instead wandering alone. The eyes of the photographer were hidden behind her hair as she repeated a few words. "Was that you?" Fulon asked his companion. "Why do I get the feeling he's lost it?" His friend replied, "I'm afraid he simply lost his common sense from inhaling too much fog." The young man reached out to his companion, trying to restore his senses, but at that moment, the photographer lunged at a companion, eyes shining with a red light. Surprised, the boy exclaimed, "What are you doing?" Liamu was holding a knife in his hand, waving it in front of his companion's face. He screamed that he wanted to kill him. The photographer was clearly not thinking clearly and behaved completely inadequate. The boys found themselves in a strange situation where they needed to calm down a crazed classmate. Full shouted, "These guys are completely out of their minds. We better get out of here." The photographer swung his knife, clearly not going to stop. One of the boys intercepted the hand holding the knife. The madman's strength seemed to have increased significantly. The classmate was having difficulty restraining him. The camera hanging around Liamu's neck detached from its strap. The photographer didn't even notice his camera had fallen to the ground. The crazed expression never left Liamu's face. The young man holding the photographer's knife-wielding hand twisted it so that he stabbed himself. Blood from Liamu's wound splattered. The delegate, wearing an unpleasant smile, suggested that he should go instead. The teenager responded, "I'm the delegate. I can't leave. I have to take care of those who stay behind." The boys began to different directions, landing on the jacket of his assailant, who hadn't actually intended to kill him. Fulon began to tremble, deeply affected by the murder he had just witnessed. Liamu, wounded, was still standing. He tried to say something, pointing a finger at a classmate. "Was it you?" the frightened boy muttered to himself, insisting he hadn't done it on purpose. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. The young man shot up from his seat and ran towards his friends, shouting wildly. Meanwhile, in the parallel world, Mita Tao was at the location where the body had been discovered. The girl covered her mouth with her palm, her eyes widening in horror. "So this is what they call a body." The sight was truly horrifying. The photographer's body was covered in eyes and hands. Mita Tao looked away from the gruesome body, trying to suppress her nausea. Wan Liang said to the assistant with a smile, "There's a trash can over there. Don't ruin the artwork." The woman felt genuinely sick, even though she had witnessed many unusual things in her life. Meanwhile, the man, he crouched next to the corpse, trying to observe every detail. He didn't feel any revulsion. Even his appetite hadn't disappeared. Wang bit into a piece of melon and looked at the unfortunate man again. They told him that the identity of the body had already been confirmed. The man handed Wang Liang the deceased's personnel file, and the representative of the Department of Special Investigations read, "Name, Lijamo, age, 16, gender, male, height, 167 centimeters, weight, 65 kilograms, date of birth, the 28th of October, 2002, Wang said, turning to the assistant. "Some of them are still moving forward. This fearless and exploratory spirit is truly admirable." The man looked at the sky and added, "But he has fallen into the paroxysm zone." Meanwhile, look for each other in a panic. No one knew what to do, but everyone was scared. Suddenly, Fan spoke up, "I think we shouldn't separate. This fog is too thick and very strange, so, the spectral world." The captain couldn't contain her emotions. She knocked the young man to the ground and exclaimed, "Why did you kill him?" Tears welled up in the blonde's eyes. Ino wanted answers to their questions. Xiao tried to calm the captain down, but it was all in vain. The girl sobbed, trembling. Chen So looked at the beauty. It seemed he liked her. Finally, he dared to touch the girl and offered his help, but Inju exclaimed, "Let me go, they killed him." Inju repeated over and over, "We had made an agreement." He fell to his knees next to Chen Su. "We agreed that the three of us were going to return home. How could this happen?" Chen also seemed upset. He gritted his teeth to keep from crying. Suddenly, everyone present heard screams and realized that there was someone else in the fog. Sweat appeared on Fan Yang's face. The hero exclaimed, "Who is it?" The young people who had just returned from the fog looked at each other, confused, through the fog. Two silhouettes approached, but they were still difficult to recognize. Chen So said the voice seemed familiar. Fan Yang stood still, then ran forward, directly into the fog. But suddenly, the hero stopped right at the edge of the white wall. He found he couldn't take another step. Suddenly, the young man realized that the fog was preventing him from entering. The hero saw, as if through a white sheet, a dark shadow rapidly approaching. Suddenly, a hand appeared from the mist, and a cry for help was heard. It was another. Fulong, alive and unharmed. He was begging Fan Yang for help. The hero's eyes widened in surprise. He didn't expect such a turn of events. The young man put aside his doubts and extended his hand. With fingers about to meet, the boy was on the ground and continued to reach his arms forward, hoping to escape the treacherous fog. Meanwhile, Fang couldn't. "Let's not do anything impulsive." His companions remained silent. P suggested that, in that case, he would go with the help of the beautiful Elksai. He explained his idea. A beautiful woman should go because, take a single step forward. A bead of sweat appeared on the hero's face. "What the hell?" he thought. The boy stared at the fog, not understanding what was happening. The hero tried to think. Urgently seeking something to help his companion, he immediately jumped from his seat and ran in the opposite direction, surprising everyone even more. The young man ordered the school children to run forward as fast as they could. Once upon a time, there was a fisherman named Kotaro Bokushima. One day, he accidentally saved a huge turtle on the seashore and was invited as a guest to the Dragon King's underwater castle. Before returning to Earth, the Dragon King's daughter gave Kotaro a jade box. The girl asked the hero that he should never open his gift. When Bokushima returned to the fishing village, he was shocked to see that everyone he knew had disappeared, and everyone else who lived there recognized him at all. Stunned by what was happening, the young man forgot the Dragon King's daughter's order and opened the jade box. This was the legend that Wang Lian told to his assistant. It's called A Day in Heaven, A Year on Earth. For Bokushima, it was only a drowsy night, but decades had passed in the mortal world. Mitao could grasp that, but she still had certain questions. Mitao sought to understand a mystery that was incomprehensible to her. In this laboratory, covered by a sheet, lay the body of Ligiamo. The girl wondered what had happened to him. The special investigations representative simply smiled, marveling at his assistant's sensitivity. He placed an apple in her hand and said that was another story entirely. Seb, the founder and king of Contus, was the most ingenious man on earth. One day, he succeeded in unlocking the secrets of the gods. This knowledge proved so useful that it even helped Siva avoid. There will be more people willing to help her. The expression on Fan Yang's face did not bode well for the clever boy. The one with glasses noticed this and decided not to insist. The hero told death. But in the end, he was merely a man who couldn't escape the gods' punishment. The gods banished the human king to the deepest reaches of hell and forced a man to push a large, rocking uphill to the top of the mountain. The rock was so big and heavy that it fell again and again, never reaching the summit. This meaningless task would repeat itself over and over, forever. The gods believed that there was no punishment more severe than forcing a man to perform useless and hopeless tasks repeatedly. At the end of the story, Wang Liang explained, "No, I don't know what this poor man found out there, but I'm sure that, from his first entry into the paradox zone, the young man has been trapped in a cycle of helpless despair. He was trapped in an endless cycle of death, experiencing it over and over. It's truly terrifying to arrive at a place like this, to see and realize that your true sentence is something that not everyone can experience. What we are witnessing now is the result of an infinite loop forcibly compressed into a single point. It is a work of art, created over a vast expanse of time, and the setting was, according to a representative from Special Investigations, Mitao wanted to understand why the so-called paradox was happening. The boy was amused that his assistant still didn't understand the point. What's important in this story isn't the punishment the gods inflicted on Sei, but the existence of the gods and their desire to punish humanity for their sins. Meanwhile, in the parallel world of spectral mist, Fan Yangang was rushing forward. The children were confused, not understanding what was happening there, and Fang couldn't explain anything at that moment. The hero had time to notice that the fog was chasing them. Alexei was running ahead of Fang. The young man was afraid of leaving her behind, so he didn't overtake her. They began to shout out their wishes. Everyone, that is, except for one boy who wasn't paying attention to the general commotion, Fan. This ninth grader was on the phone with his mother. At that precise, the others that their teacher was unconscious and that the driver had disappeared. The fog was so dense that nothing could be seen beyond it. P opened his mouth again and directed his. Suddenly, a rock appeared on the girl's precarious path. She didn't notice it and tripped. Lixie fell to the ground. The beauty screamed in pain. Xiao, who was running ahead, noticed the fall of her friend. He watched as Fan Yang's figure paused behind the beautiful woman. The hero helped Loxi to her feet, supporting her by the elbow. The girl felt pain when she put weight on her leg. The young man looked back and realized that the fog had caught up to them. Captain Inu was running ahead. When the girl no longer heard her friend's footsteps behind her, she stopped and called out to them. Fan yelled at the girls to run faster. The young man didn't abandon Loxi and ran with her. Suddenly, Chen So shouted, "Fan, get down!" The respected man threw something in the direction of his classmates. The hero made them duck their heads because they were in danger. The friends fell to the ground, and a column of flames erupted behind them. "Lianda," asked the clever boy what he had thrown. Chen So replied, "It was a Molotov cocktail made from food I found in the supermarket." Liang Da raised a finger, thinking that this was really cool. Xiao asked the boys what they should do now, seeing as the fire had briefly stopped the fog. Fang wondered how he should respond to the others. Finally, the hero pointed to a spot ahead and motioned for his companions to follow. The friend spotted a staircase and an entrance up ahead and ran towards it. Fang urged his companions to run directly to the second floor. A black-gloved hand rested on a cane. A dark figure wearing a black cloak watched the children from the building's rooftop. Meanwhile, the last member of the research team ran into the room. Fang immediately rushed to close the doors and asked the others to shut all the windows. "Fulun," he asks the old man. "In that case, who will be able to find the police?" Then he added, "The person who gets help will have absolute authority." The words of the boy with glasses motivated the shouted to his leader, "You're crazy hiding here. We'll just be waiting for our doom," Fang replied. "Compared to being chased all the time, here at the, if nothing else, we'll have a better chance at survival." The character had some assumptions he wanted to share. For the other classmates, this explanation sufficed, but not for Fulon. Meanwhile, the others rushed to fulfill the leader's request, closing all the windows. Chenu ran to a window on the second floor. Xiao followed his companions, and he also closed every window he came across. The room that the investigation team entered turned out to be a hospital. The children, exhausted and frightened, scattered throughout the rooms, ready to get a good night's rest. Luxi's injured knee required attention. The treatment center had everything she needed. Alexei was crying because the treatment for her injured knees was not a pleasant experience. The boys reported that it was too early for them to rest. They needed to verify if they were truly safe in that location. Chen instructed the others to check all the doors and windows, ensuring everything was securely closed and that there shouldn't be any issues. Liangta sighed in relief, finally able to rest. After all, he really wanted to sleep. Fan, however, seemed somewhat tense, and his emotions were also being transmitted to Chen. He inquired with the leader about what was happening and heard the noises echoing in the hospital hallways. The hero explained that he was worried about the two companions who had returned from the fog. Chen recalled that something similar had happened to them before. Fang kept his gaze fixed on the young women who were sitting in a separate room. He closed the door and said to his companions, "Tonight, representative to act." He jumped off the bench and said he would go find the police himself. Fang watched the instigator carefully and noticed a slight smile on his face. "The brave class representative, the three of us will be on guard." The young people didn't argue, but immediately accepted this necessary measure. Xiao and Loxi were already fast asleep. The girls were extremely tired. That day, they had experienced emotional exhaustion. Inu, on the other hand, couldn't sleep and kept thinking about Lijiamo. Chenu also remembered his friend, whom he had lost that day. The next morning, an unpleasant surprise awaited the explorers. The two youths who had returned from the fog said, "With the restrictions and the small amount of food, staying here is like waiting to die. It's better to go there and face the invisible enemy head-on." Fang tried to calm the boys and asked them to carefully consider their decision. Fang said, "We don't even know what it is. It's very aggressive, so I don't think you can do anything. Also, we still don't know about the dangers of the fog. What's the difference between you two running outside and a butterfly throwing itself into the fire?" Full-on replied, "Stop talking nonsense. You just don't consider us members of your team." Shanu looked at the girls. They were all silent and didn't. They interrupted the conversation. Two classmates called the others a bunch of cowards and headed towards the hospital exit, armed with a scalpel and a chainsaw. "Fang them," he observed silently. He understood that these two had returned from the fog, and they were damaged. The hero said to the companions who remained behind, "Pack your things quickly. We have to. Leave now." LXY asked in confusion, "You said we weren't going to leave with them." The young man explained that they would have a better chance of escaping, while those two drew the danger of the fog's attention. The opportunity shouldn't be wasted. Suddenly, Xiao asked the others to wait. The girl felt that using their own classmates as bait was unfair. Maybe in another, headed towards the fog, behind which the unknown awaited. Although the teenager was determined, terror caused sweat to break out on his face. The representative asked his classmates, "Situation." Fang would have left without her, but now the lives of her other companions were at stake, and she felt responsible for them. Chen supported Fang. Fang was just trying to. Persuading them is impossible. In their current state, they won't listen to anyone. Considering our situation, we don't have time to worry about others who have made their own choices. Lianta and the girls seemed surprised, as they weren't strong enough to make decisions like that. This is exactly the kind of situation where the group needs a leader. They all went to the warehouse. From the hospital, in order to replenish their supplies, the girls quietly packed the necessary items into their backpacks. No one was in the mood to talk. Suddenly, everyone on the second floor heard a piercing scream. Fan was the first to rush towards the sound, followed by Chen Zhu, who emerged from the room. The young people ran to the building's roof and looked down in amazement. It was difficult to see clearly through the fog, but when it cleared slightly, Fan witnessed something horrible. This vision deeply disturbed him. Lying before the boy's eyes was the mutilated body of his classmate lay in a pool of blood. A figure in a dark cloak and a mask with a bird's beak stood next to the remains of the unfortunate man, blood dripping from the protagonist sees a terrible scene from above. A man in a plague doctor mask stands over a body, the murderer's knife in hand. A large puddle of red broth spreads around the fallen boy. Fan and his friend watch the situation in complete shock. The masked man slowly raises his head towards them. Terrified, Fan's friend tells him he's a fool for looking. The boy with glasses shouts that the creature has spotted them from their position. The masked man simply observes them in silence. Fan stares at the scene with an expression of pure that they should stay there. He would be back soon with help. Luxi hoped everything would go well, but Fan Yang was skeptical. The boy with glasses extended his hand forward, and, from the outside, concentration, wondering if the masked man is gone. His nervous partner asks him where he thinks he's going. The staircase is empty and completely silent, but Fan insists that he will go. Check the downstairs area first. Without hesitation, he runs down the stairs. Once downstairs, he wonders if the man really got away that easily. Suddenly, a strange smell catches his attention. Note that there are other smells besides the metallic scent of the red liquid. The cut in the body on the ground is incredibly precise. A metallic sound snaps him out of his thoughts. The creature appears out of nowhere and attacks him with a power tool. Nothing, and attacks him with a power tool. The monster turns out to be one of his classmates, now deformed, breathless. Fang wonders who Wan Min is. The creature murmurs that he must finish the job. With a quick movement, the boy steps on the ground to propel himself forward. He barely manages to dodge the attack. The creature tells him to go to the underworld. Fang prepares for the next move. With his face full of tension, the monster attacks again with his tool. Suddenly, the monster is struck from behind by something. The monster starts screaming, and we see a deep wound on its back. Just then, the other students arrive, shouting Fan's name. The creature then gets up as if nothing happened. His wounds begin to close at an incredible speed. The monster's eye locks onto the new group of students. It realizes it has been seen and becomes enraged. The creature screams that it will wipe them all out. Fan's friend, Chenzo, decides to take action. He yells at the others to run while he distracts it. The white-haired girl doesn't seem to agree with the plan. Chen runs at full speed, and the monster chases after him. He thinks the monster won't catch up at this rate. The creature waves its weapon furiously. In a desperate attempt, Chen throws a bottle. He seemed like he wanted to touch the air, but he managed to touch the fog with his index finger. P came to the conclusion that there was something strange about that fog. Meanwhile, the representative of the was carrying. The young man stumbles and falls to the ground. Desperate, he looks for something else in his backpack. He laments, realizing that it was his last bottle. As he trembles, he wonders what he should do. Now, the monster approaches, poised to deliver the final blow. Chenso closes his eyes, bracing for the worst. The creature raises its weapon, ready to end Chen's life. With his eyes closed, the boy prepares for his end. The monster raises its arms and shouts that it will send him to the next world. Just as the weapon is about to fall, someone intervenes. In the last second, the white-haired girl shoves Chen out of the way. They both roll across the ground, narrowly avoiding the fatal blow. The monster stares at them from a distance, not understanding what happened. The girl asks Chen if he is all right. Quickly, she gets up and helps him to his feet. The young woman yells at him to get up, because the creature is already coming towards them. Fan observes his friends. The hallway is too wide, and there is nowhere to hide. The protagonist realizes that they need a distraction. Chen yells at him to run, but the monster is too close. Desperate, both companions see that there is no escape, but they manage to reach the stairwell door. The monster relentlessly pursues them. Chen and the girl hurry up the stairs as quickly as possible. The effort proves too much for Chen Shou, who begins to run out of breath. Leaning against the railing, the young man is completely exhausted. His partner yells at him not to stop, no matter what. Chen warns her that the monster is running up from below. Fan sees the monster chasing after his friends. Our hero jumps and strikes the creature with a blunt object. The impact echoes loudly, but the monster barely flinches. Fang lands and drops the makeshift weapon he was using. With a scream, he draws the beast's attention, causing it to furiously chase after him. The class had already stepped into complete darkness. The young man thought, "The fog is too thick. I can't even see the path beneath my feet. Which way is the police station?" The monster changes its target and goes after the protagonist, while the girl tells Chen Shou that they should separate to increase their chances of survival. The young man nods, and they both head off in different directions. Ladder. The chase now moves to a long and narrow hallway. Cheng Cho manages to land a solid blow on the creature's deformed arm. Descending the stairs at high speed, Cho flees from the monster, passing the white-haired girl, who also runs while watching the monster chase after Fan. With a furious roar, the beast threatens to destroy everyone. Its face is contorted with rage, displaying a thirst for destruction. The protagonist attacks again, managing to make his opponent stumble backward. After the blow, the monster staggers, but quickly recovers. Fan realizes something alarming. The creature is moving much faster than before. Gritting his teeth, the boy prepares for the next clash. The following impact generates a flash of light. The beast manages to grab Fan and lift him into the air. It asks him if he is a manager while holding him tightly. The monster screams about Chen Shou and some acid. The protagonist is surprised. Listening to those words, his companions observe the scene in panic from a distance. Chen Shou rummages through his backpack, remembering he already used the acid in the basement. Everyone wonders what they can do now that they are cornered. What can they do now that they are cornered? In one swift movement, Fan throws a small metallic object. A lighter flies through the air towards the monster, its small flame shining brightly. For a moment, the hero shouts to his friends to run as fast as they can. Seconds later, a massive explosion rocks the entire building. Outside the hospital, a group of 3 students manages to escape. One of the girls comments that the fog is too dense. She suggests they find a place to hide, as the monster could still be nearby. As they walk, suddenly, the teenager froze, paralyzed. His limbs wouldn't respond to his brain's commands and remained motionless. He could barely lower his head to look at his feet. What he saw of the group tells his companions not to worry. Suddenly, he stops dead in his tracks. He asks why he feels like there is something right in front of them. A sudden terror seizes the girl. Purple hair. Out of the fog, a creature with tentacles appears. The boy shouts that something is coming towards them. Terrified, he yells at the girls to run and escape. The young women remain, paralyzed by fear. The purple-haired girl feels that her body isn't responding. She wonders why she can't move. Suddenly, they are surrounded by total darkness. In front of them, the creature opens its jaws. The boy with the cap looks on in horror. Glowing tentacles are heading towards him. Just as they are about to be attacked, an explosion lights up the place. The shockwave launches them into the air. The 3 students fall to the ground, dazed. The purple-haired girl wonders if they survived and how it was possible. Suddenly, everyone is in shock to see the building explode again. One of the girls screams Fan Yang's name in desperation. She warns him not to go, as it's too dangerous. Amidst the smoke and dust, Fan, He appears, walking towards them. The girl asks if he's all right, and, relieved, runs to hug him, overjoyed that he's safe. The other boy remarks that Fan is very fortunate. Suddenly, he realizes that two people are missing and asks about Chenzu and Chenyu's whereabouts. The protagonist silently clenches his fist with a somber expression and informs them that they didn't make it out. Fan cautions them to run because the place is about to explode again. He throws himself towards the smoke from the explosion. The shockwave slams into him, sending him crashing into the debris. In pain, he wonders if his friends managed to escape. As the smoke dissipates, he slowly gets to his feet. Before him, everything is engulfed in flames. The hospital begins to collapse. Fan runs to escape the falling rubble that it would have stunned anyone. In a matter of seconds, his legs had turned into skeletons. The young man's hands began to turn gray, a sign of possible tissue necrosis, is falling all around him. With a determined look, he realizes that his friends are still inside. He covers his face as the fire consumes the building. Eventually, he manages to reunite with his three, safe and sound. Their companions are accounted for. The young man in the cap suggests that they search for the others. He adds that Chen Shou is very clever and must have found shelter. Fang remains silent, wearing a certain look, lost in thought. He begins to call out to his friends amidst the desolation. The group splits up to cover more ground among the ruins. The boy in the cap returns and says that he couldn't find them. The girl, with purple hair, asks if they are gone as well. The protagonist maintains his serious and somber expression. He says that this is not a place to stay and that they must leave soon. The hero decides to leave them a bag with provisions in case they are still alive. His companions watch him in silence, sadness evident on their faces. They know it's the only thing they can do for now. They leave behind a cloth bag, filled with essential supplies, hoping that their friends will find it. Meanwhile, another group of students explores the city. A boy with gray hair wonders aloud. How is what he's seeing even possible? The shelves that were burned are now like new. Inside the store, the rest of the group can't believe it. A girl says that the fire destroyed everything, and that this isn't the work of humans. Another young man adds that the shelves are just the beginning. The food they had taken has also been replenished. A blonde girl confirms that she checked the mall and that everything that they had packed was mysteriously restocked. It seems like someone is constantly renewing their resources. The gray-haired boy realizes what that means and suddenly shouts that they have infinite supplies. The group is happy to know that they won't have to worry about food. One of them mocks Fang for having left. Meanwhile, a young man named Quisaba fabrics. A moment later, his classmates heard wild screams, and the children were terrified. A thought flashed through Fan's mind again. This is really serious. At that, is approached by another boy, who tells him he has something important to tell him. Quisaba calmly asks him to speak. The boy suggests they find a more private place to talk. Outside, sitting on a bench, the boy prepares to speak, telling Quisaba that he will tell him everything he knows. He begins to recall that he was the first guard on duty the previous night. In a flashback, we see Quisaba explaining the surveillance system. To prevent any accidents, they would take turns guarding the area throughout the day. The long-haired boy drew the first guard duty and had to begin. Despite his bad luck, he took his task very seriously. Back in the present, Quisaba asks him if the store appeared normal. He confirms that it did. The shelves were still burned, and the AFI food had not been restocked, but he had to use the restroom in the middle of the night. Upon returning to the supermarket, he was incredibly surprised. Quisaba wonders if the store changed in the 2 minutes he was gone. The young man, confused, says that is exactly what happened. He believes that something very strange is going on. Quisaba, deep in thought, tells him that he has provided very important information, useful. Then he asks if he has shared this with anyone else. The boy denies it flatly. The leader tells him he is very wise to keep the secret, as telling it would only generate panic. Unnecessary in the group, Quisaba puts a hand on his shoulder and tells him that he handled it well. The boy, a little nervous, tries to ask him what he thinks. The leader, with an intense look, tells him that he knows what he is thinking and asks him to meet at a specific place that same night. He assures him that they can talk about everything in more detail there. At night, in front of a huge office building, someone shouts that it can't be a joke. Elsewhere, a young man is playing cards, while a girl tells him not to bet if he doesn't have the nerve. Inside a luxurious lobby, the hero asked her not to worry and to wait for him at home, assuring her that nothing would happen to him. While his classmates were discussing their desires, the bus was heading towards the teenagers heard a desperate cry for help and immediately recognized the voice of their class representative. The young man could barely move, begging for help over and over. His legs were already. Man in a black shirt looks fed up with the situation. As he leaves, A couple asks him where he is going so late. He replies that the girls don't want to smell cigarette smoke while they're sleeping. He heads to the elevator, and the young woman tells him to take care, to which he replies by telling her to shut up. The man goes up the stairs and pauses to look at himself in a mirror. Then, he has a glass of wine before entering a large, empty dining room. There, a person is waiting, seated at one of the many tables. The host explains that he lit a candle so as not to attract attention and invites him to sit down. The guest is surprised to see the delicious dishes laid out on the table. His host asks him if he knows how to cook, and then wishes him bon appétit. Upon tasting a piece of meat, the man in the black shirt is amazed by how flavorful it is. While he eats, his companion tells him that they should talk about what he said that morning. The guest responds that he has a good guess as to what that's about. Partner listens attentively, curious to hear what he is going to say. The man in the black shirt believes that the reason their products are restocked is because his world synchronizes with the real. For example, if they took things from a store here in the real world, newspapers would report mysterious losses when employees restocked those same products. Those same items would then reappear in their world. The man with glasses asked why this hadn't happened until the previous night. The guest explained that they had been watching the supermarket ever since the fire. As long as someone was watching, synchronization couldn't occur. This phenomenon only happened when no one was observing the location. The man with glasses understood the key point. Everything only changed when the last observer left. The guest confirmed that his theory was correct, meaning that synchronization only occurs without mind. Exposed to the bone, something that could only have been caused by magic. The closer the class representative got, the more visible he became through the fog. The boys, being observed, just like in video games. The host congratulated him on his interesting deduction, and then asked how he planned to use this information to escape. The guest put his hands on the table to show that it wouldn't be simple. Their plan was to leave a mark somewhere, so that when the products were restocked, that information would reach the outside world. That way, there was a possibility of them being rescued. The man with the glasses repeated the word rescued with doubt, and said that it was simply a message to the outside world. Standing up, he mentioned that he knew an easier way to do it. The guest was confused by what he said. The man put a hand on his shoulder and reminded him of something, that the disappearance of objects was an important clue. They had seen something similar when they first arrived. The nervous guest realized what he meant. The man with the glasses confirmed that he was right. The truth. Holding a fork, he said that there was another way to obtain information. According to him, life is exchanged for knowledge. In one swift movement, he used the fork to take some of the main course of his friend. With a cold look, she told him that now he was going to disappear. Outside a building, a girl gazes at the screens wistfully. Meanwhile, several men in black suits emerge from a luxury car. At the front of the group is an older, white-haired man with a cigarette in his mouth and a young man wearing glasses. The host welcomes them and addresses Mr. Siansen, saying that his food is ready. The boss, with an imposing presence, orders his men to follow him, as dinner will be on the second floor. Suddenly, the scene cuts to a news report. The news anchor reports that there is no progress in the case of the school bus that disappeared on November 9th. The police are continuing their investigations. The report mentions that more than 40 students they were about to rush to their friend's aid, but Fang's shout stopped them, ordering them to stay put. One of the teenagers shouted, indignant, "You're a coward, can't you see he needs missing," and displays the host's photo. The young man turns off the television and apologizes to his guest. Siansen smiles, saying not to worry, as he can take care of such matters. Small. The host leads him to a table in the empty dining room. Once the boss is seated, he recognizes the food and remarks that it's his favorite dish. His host then asks him how the flavor is. The older man tries a bite and confirms that it's delicious. Suddenly, the world distorts, and we see the previous guest lying lifeless on the ground. His host tells the boss that, if he likes it, he can prepare it again next time. This revelation leaves the older man wide-eyed in shock. Unexpectedly, he begins to scream in a terrifying manner. The bodyguards react instantly, surrounding the table with their weapons drawn. One of them warns his boss that the situation is dangerous. Terrified, the host shouts to call the police. The guards quickly immobilize him, placing a knife to his neck. With complete calm, the boss gives the order to dispose of him. Just at that moment, one of his men inform him that they found an inscription on the back of the body. This news seems to pique the boss's curiosity. The story then transitions to a memory from the past, a news report. It reports on a robbery that occurred on June 12th. At the crime scene, we see the host as just a child. In front of him, a body lies on the ground while the police investigate. A man, with a ring on his finger, places his hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy's gaze reflects profound terror. He thought that maybe the world was wrong. In the rain, the young man visits the grave of a woman, presumably his mother. After leaving a flower, he rests his umbrella on the tombstone to protect it from the rain. He remains standing, soaking wet, as sadness consumes him. Help? The hero replied. The situation isn't clear. Running out to help him could be even more dangerous. The children were confused. What were they supposed to do in that case? The hero asked. Question arises. Who would want to return to a world like that? Back in the present, the host looks out the window with a malicious smile. He believes that, because everyone has their own needs, they can use that situation to their advantage. It is revealed that his goal is to bring glory to his family name. They both plan to use each other to achieve their respective goals. Finally, the young man looks at the boss and calls him father. In a flashback, we see a quiet apartment complex. There, several children are playing in a sandbox, looking impressed by something. A little boy named Fan is building a detailed sandcastle. The boy wipes the sweat from his brow, exhausted but clearly proud of his work. He has finally finished his magnificent creation. The other children watch him in amazement. One girl wonders why he always plays alone. Another comments that she would like to build one just like his. Suddenly, a woman approaches the sandbox. She tells Fan that dinner is ready. Prepared at home, the boy's face lights up when he sees his mother. He runs towards her, very happy to show her what he has built. He asks her if she saw his castle, but the memory fades away. Back in the present, Fan and his friends stand before the same building. One of his companions recognizes the location as the protagonist's house. With a serious expression, Fan gazes at the balcony and confirms that it is indeed his home. One of the girls suggests they go inside, noting that the place doesn't seem very secure. He agrees and unlocks the door with his key. The interior of the apartment is completely dark and silent. Fan freezes in the doorway, lost in his thoughts. Just then, he experiences a vision of his mother in the kitchen. She tells him that he's back, and that the food will be ready shortly. The woman smiles and mentions she went shopping to make his favorite meal. The boy appears confused by this sudden and vivid memory. His Xiao for her clothes. The girl was stunned by the request. Fang explained, anyone who has a coat or jacket, give it to me. His companions began throwing jackets and shirts at. Friends pull him out of his trance, asking if he's all right. He apologizes for having stood there motionless. He asks his companions to relax in the living room while he looks around. Something related to his mother. One of his friends offers to assist him in the search, but Fang tells him it's not necessary and that he can handle it himself. One of the girls comments that the house is small, so it shouldn't take too long. The protagonist enters one of the rooms by himself. Inside, he searches through the books on a bookshelf. He remembers that his mother used to write in a diary, so he takes out a simple-looking book and carefully opens it. On the first page he reads, his mother wrote the date, July 4th. She mentions that she will finish her work soon and will look for a new one. She also talks about how the temperature dropped and how she calmed her son. The following entry is from July 5th, one day after the accident. The mother writes that the bus with the students and teachers disappeared. She desperately wonders where her son could possibly be. The last entry is from July 6th. Apparently, some people are coming to look for her soon. She doesn't know if she can trust him, but it's her only chance to get him back. Fan is shocked when she reads her mother's last words. Suddenly, a strange white smoke begins to fill the room. Her friends notice the smoke from outside and become worried. One of the girls kicks the door open, scared. She is shocked to see what's inside. They find Fan lying on the ground, completely unconscious. The scene changes to a futuristic-looking laboratory. A monitor connected to a bed displays very unstable brain activity readings. A girl is convulsing as the doctors try to reassess her condition. Watching everything from an adjoining room, a man finally speaks. Two people stare at a huge metal door. With a loud, his feet, the young man began tying them together, hurrying because he knew they had to act immediately. In the next instant, a long rope made of clothing flew across the bolt. Rumble. The door finally begins to open. In a vast cosmic space, a voice calls out to Fan. He floats aimlessly between rectangles of bright light. The young man realizes that he is in strange and surreal place. Each light seems to contain a fragment of his memories. When he touches one of them, he sees himself as a child. In that memory, Fan excitedly calls out to his mother and shows her, proudly, the sandcastle he just finished building. Other images from his past appear around him. He remembers his mother comforting him as he cried. He also sees the red bus from the accident that left them trapped. The image of a completely empty city reminds him of his current situation. Fan wonders if everything he is experiencing is just a dream. Suddenly, he feels his consciousness fading. The boy opens his eyes in a sterile white room. wondering where he is at that moment. Outside, some doctors are rushing down a hallway. One of them says that the space-time rift is stable, and adds that they can only maintain it like that for 5 minutes. A young man with white hair approaches and asks to be let in. They tell him that it's dangerous, but he insists that there is nothing to worry about. With determined steps, the man enters the room, approaches the bed, and asks if he is Fan Yang. Fang doesn't understand anything and he asks who that guy is. When he tries to speak, he only manages to say the word mom. He realizes that the voice isn't his own. The white-haired man confirms that he is in his mother's body. Mother. This revelation leaves Fan completely shocked. He touches his neck, feeling a voice that doesn't belong to him. Full of anger, he yells at the stranger, asking who he is and what he did to his mother. The man tells him not to worry, because she is just a bridge. He explains that the one they really need is him. He adds that Fang is very intelligent for having noticed the relationship. Fog, long enough to reach the spot where the class representative was lying. Fang shouted at him to grab onto it. The boy mustered the strength to hold the rope between the two worlds. The figure of his mother explains that the empty world is a projection. It exists outside of space and time, in a state of distortion. The white-haired man says that time, it can either speed up or slow down time. It can also create paradoxes in space-time. Fang asks if all the anomalies are due to these rules. The young man replies that that's not the important thing. Now, the most dangerous thing is the correspondence between the worlds. He warns that the actions of those trapped inside will bring disaster to the real world. Despite everything, he tells Fang not to worry. The man offers his assistance so that he can return. However, to achieve this, he needs an assistant on the other side. He extends his hand, proposing a deal. Fang looks at him and asks why he should believe him. The young man smiles and says he will give him a demonstration of his sincerity. He quickly lunges towards the bed. In the control room, the monitors go haywire. A doctor shouts that they have detected a dangerous paradox. The energy of the gate is increasing at a rapid pace. The white-haired man tells his companion that they need to remove Fan when he returns. In the meantime, strange things begin to happen in the room. The white-haired young man wonders if what he's imagining could actually be possible. Suddenly, Fan screams from inside. From his mother's body. The door can't remain open any longer. Time is running out. Hand that was already beginning to wither away. The hero felt the pull and tugged with all his might. He noticed that the fabric was starting to tear. Beads of sweat appeared on Fang's face. He was completely tense, making one final, desperate effort. The young man pulled with all his power, and the class representative finally emerged from the fog, falling right on top of Fang, knocking him onto his back. She repeated the same word over and over, fog, fog, fog. At that moment, his companions saw that the young man had been reduced to a skeleton. Suddenly, everyone noticed that bridge. The driver was thinking, right now, these brats are making a lot of noise. How strange. This road is always packed. Why don't I see any cars today? The man behind the wheel, the body of the unfortunate representative was beginning to fade away. The fog also began to dissipate, and the students saw the summer sky with the full moon illuminating everything around them. Everyone present saw a stranger sitting calmly, eating something. At his feet lay the representative's body, destroyed by the fog. The man was sitting on a bench, as if nothing had happened. It's like looking at a fresh fruit, he said after a pause. But you just press a little, and the fence bursts. The stranger finished his strange contemplation and he asked if there would be an exception this time. With that, he put the strawberry in his mouth. The incomprehensible words of the blond man, his comparisons, and the death of the class representative left Fan Yang stunned and confused. The fog finally dissipated completely, and behind the bench where the stranger was sitting, they could see the park and the night city with its lights. The students looked around in surprise, wondering if they had gotten lost in the middle of the city. The chubby boy couldn't hold back his tears, and his crying began to irritating everyone around him. The young man just wanted to go home, as he had pending homework he hadn't been able to finish. He had barely convinced his mother to let him go on the field trip, and she would probably hit him again when he got back. The boy next to him said angrily, "Shut up, you look like a man, but you're crying like a little girl." The boy fell silent, trying to control his emotions, but the tears in his eyes betrayed his true state. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to some inscriptions on the ground made with a twig. Fan. He was writing something with concentration, not paying attention to anyone else. The chubby kid asked his companion what he was doing. The hero responded, "I'm trying to analyze the facts and details that we already